Okay, good evening everyone. Welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. This is Sham Kagodia. Now, before I start the discussion, if there is no issue with the sound, can you please give me a thumbs up so that we can get on with the discussion? Done. Let's start then. So, yesterday, what we have discussed? We have discussed the concept of banking, and we finished the idea for banking, in fact. Now, many of you, I was just checking your comments after the class is over. Many of you basically stated that, sir, it is very difficult for me to remember everything, right? Very natural, right? Nothing wrong with that, right? So your concern was very difficult to remember everything for me. How do I revise it, etc., etc. Now, one recommendation that I can give you, again, this is either recommendation or advice or a tip. What I can simply tell you is try to prepare mind maps for every chapter. Try to prepare the idea of a mind map. Mind map is basically nothing but a short note. For example, if I were to prepare a mind map, let me give you a very simple idea here. Right? All of you have heard of monetary policy. Let me know. Have you heard of the term monetary policy or not? So, monetary policy is one of the very important functions of Reserve Bank of India. If I want to prepare a mind map for, let's say, Reserve Bank of India, right? So, this is how it will start. RBI, right? So, at the fag end, basically at the extreme left end, I'll write RBI, and within the functions of RBI, within functions of RBI, one of the function of RBI will be monetary policy. But apart from, right, the functions of RBI, can I have multiple branches here? For example, the origin story of RBI. Can I write certain points regarding origin of RBI? Right? Do you remember the name of the committee that recommended RBI? The starting date, the date on which Reserve Bank of India was established, right? Initially, it was privately owned, and then it was nationalized by Government of India in 1949, etc. So those will be the branches regarding origin. Then write certain sections of RBI, certain sections of RBI Act of 1934, Section 7, Section 8, Section 21, Section 47, Section 40, sorry, Section 17. All these are some of the very important sections of Reserve Bank of India. Just mention the important sections. And right before that or after that, I can also have the composition of Central Board of Directors. If you remember, I had given you a very simple composition, right? If you remember that 1, 4, 10, 4, 1 plus 1. Can I have a composition like this? 1, 4, 10, 4 plus 1 plus 1. Right, so that is basically the composition of Reserve Bank of India. Then comes the functions of RBI. Right, within the functions of RBI, right, one of the functions will be controlling inflation. Controlling inflation. Another will be, right, the monetary policy. Third one will be, right, basically the idea of the printing and the distribution of currencies. Printing and distribution of currencies. Right, then there will be Deposit Insurance Credit Guarantee Corporation. Then banker to government, it is referred to as banker to government, etc., etc. And I said one of the very important functions of RBI is monetary policy. Right, within monetary policy, again I'll further divide this into two parts. One, I'll write it as a qualitative, and the other one is quantitative. One is qualitative, the other one is quantitative. In quantitative, I'll write the tools which are repo, reverse repo, okay, reverse repo. Then there is a cash reserve ratio. Then there is a statutory liquidity ratio. Then there is standing deposit facility. And then finally, open market operation. Open market operation, quantitative set of tools. What about qualitative set of tools? Right, first one is rationing of credit. First one is rationing of credit. After rationing of credit, or within this, I can have a one more, right, branching like this, and write the priority sector lending. Right, after rationing of credit, variation of margin requirements. Variation of margin requirements. Then there is also variation in the consumer credit. Variation in consumer credit. Then we have publicity. We also have right moral suasion. Moral suasion. We also have right that is a direct action. Direct action. Now in front of each one of them, I'll write one statement. Repo, rate of interest charged by RBI when it will give loan. Right? Reverse repo, it is a rate of interest charged by the banks when they will give loans to RBI. CRR, percentage of NDTL the banks will keep with RBI. SLR, percentage of NDTL the banks will keep with themselves. Right? STF, standing deposit facility, it is the rate of interest the banks will charge when they will give loans to RBI. Open market operation, it is basically the activities where RBI will purchase or sell government securities in the market. Done. That's it. That's it. Right. So what you have done is you have basically prepared a mind map for the most important part of the Reserve Bank of India's functioning, that is monetary policy. So my recommendation to all of you is it becomes easier. I hope you understand this. It becomes easier for you to revise and remember and right use it even for revising at the last moment, let's say 3 or 4 days before the exams. I hope you understand. 3 or 4 days before the exams, you can use these notes very easily for very quick revision. That is basically if you sit one day, right, throughout the day, you can revise all these mind maps or memory charts that you have prepared for all the subjects. Done? Right. So this would be my recommendation to all of you. Again, it is an advice. It is an advice. It is not a constitutional requirement. It is just an advice to all of you. Right? You can make your preparations easier. That's it. You can make your preparation easier for UPSC exams. Done? So yesterday what we have discussed, we continued with the concept of regional rural bank, RRB, regional rural bank. And after regional rural bank, we have discussed the cooperative banks in India, right? Or before that also, we have discussed cooperative banks. After that, we have discussed payment banks, small finance bank, right? The NBFCs, various committee recommendations, right? Etc. etc. And 3 more questions from the banking sector is left out. We'll discuss right after some time. Don't worry. Now, let me start with a new chapter today, the budget as well as the finance commission. The budgeting as a concept as well as finance commission. And if you have checked the paper, this year's PTS paper, the straightforward question was asked from the concept of finance commission. Okay, straightforward question. Now let's start. What are the points I'll be covering? What are the points I'll be covering in this chapter? We'll start with the idea of a budget. Right? What do you mean by budget? What are the important concepts or the points related to budget? What is the process of budgeting in India? Budget accounts as well as deficits, FRBM and encasing review committee. Then we'll have a discussion regarding public debt, right, etc. After that, we'll take up the discussion for finance commission. What is the concept of finance commission? Right, what is the composition? What are the recommendations of 15th finance commission? Right, how it will be affecting the finances, etc. We'll understand that. Okay, now let me start. First and foremost, understand these points. I'll come back to this, don't worry. Understand these points. The term budget, let's go point by point. The term budget is not mentioned in the constitution. The term budget is not mentioned in the constitution. Please remember this. This was asked, in fact, once in UPSC prelims. Is not mentioned in the constitution of India. Right, now what is mentioned in the Constitution of India? Under Article 112. Under Article 112, there is a term called as Annual Financial Statement, AFS. Annual Financial Statement. So under Article 112, generally using that power under the Article 112, right, the government of India annually, that is for every year, will present a document or a process will be conducted which is called as budget. But when I say budget, please understand this. Is it always presented by the union government? What about the states? Do the states also have a budget? Of course, yes. Every state will have its own independent budget. But for UPSC exams, don't worry about individual states. Focus on the union budget. So union budget is presented on the first working day of February. Second point, it is presented on first working day. That's very important. First working day of February month. Remember this also. It is presented on the first working day of February. Until couple of years ago, what government used to do was present the budget on the last working day of February. But now what we have done, we have preponed it. Right? Rather than last working day, we have preponed it to first working day of February. And the reason is very simple. The process which was followed earlier was like this. You will present the budget on the last working day of February. And after this, there is a particular process that you're supposed to follow. I'll tell you that. Have patience. By the time the whole process is over, you're already in the month of, let's say, May. You're already in the month of May. Now, please tell me, don't you think this month of May, it will come in the next financial year? Let me know. Will this month of May come in the next financial year or not? That is one point. And another very important point is, whenever the government will present the budget, it is for one financial year. It is for one financial year. That is, right, the month will start, or the financial year will start from the 1st of April, will go till 31st of March. Right, I believe I've told you about the financial year, I believe in the third class. Please go back, revise. So the financial year will start from the 1st of April of this year, will go on till 31st of March next year. Now you want to announce budget for this financial year. By the time you announce, get it passed, the whole process is over, you're in the month of May, which is already part of next financial year. So that is the precise reason to ensure that, in order to ensure that the budget is introduced, passed, and the whole process is over, we have preponed the presentation of the budget to the first working day of a financial year. To the first working day of, to the first working day of February, not financial year, to the first working day of February. Now there is a very interesting question. Budget is for the present financial year or the upcoming financial year? My dear, you tell me. You think of it and tell me. Right? Don't you think your question itself, right, is very, very, right, ambiguous? Ambiguous in the sense, if you're in the month of February, your financial year is going to end on the 31st of March. Will you announce budget for the current year? How? Because the current year already 10 months are over. Obviously, it has to be for upcoming financial year. It has to be for upcoming financial year. Right? So, first working day of February, we will announce the budget. Third very important point, why do we announce the budget? Why? What is the need? Simple idea. Whenever the government announces the budget, there are two very important documents in the budget. There are two very important documents. One is called as appropriation bill. One is referred to as appropriation bill. And the second one is referred to as finance bill. One is appropriation bill and the second one is finance bill. Now, what is the basic idea of appropriation bill and finance bill? In the budget, government will tell you the data as to how much money they will be spending. How much will be their expenditure in the one financial year. And in case of finance bill, government will tell you information as to how much income government will be earning in the one financial year. So appropriation bill will give you information regarding expenditure of the government in the next 1 year. Finance bill will give you information regarding income they will collect in the next 1 year. Now these are called as budget estimates. These are referred to as budget estimates. Important, understand this. These are referred to as budget estimates. For example, if I ask you in the next 1 year how much money you are going to spend, you'll basically say, right, sir, I might be spending, let's say, 1 lakh rupees. Just hypothetically, I might be spending 1 lakh rupees. Can I call this as estimate for the next 1 year? But please tell me, you are saying in the next 1 year you're going to spend, right, let's say 1 lakh rupees. Now, right, the year has started. I will ask you in the month of December, how much money have you spent? Now, is the logic okay? The money that you have already spent in the month of December could be higher than 1 lakh rupees or could be lower than 1 lakh rupee as well. Yes or no? Right? Tell me whether does it make sense to you or not. It could be higher than 1 lakh rupees, can be lower than 1 lakh rupee also. Can be. I'm not giving you a confirmation. I'm saying it can be. Why? You are sitting in the month of February and you're deciding next year I might be spending 1 lakh rupees. But are you sure what is going to happen in the next 1 year? I hope you understand this. Right? Are you sure what is going to happen in the next 1 year? Absolutely no. You are not sure. It could so happen that you might end up spending more than 1 lakh, or you could end up spending less than 1 lakh as well. So now is it okay if I say whatever the budget estimates, government will have to revise these estimates? Let me know. Whatever are these government estimates, based on what is the reality, government has to revise these estimates. It will happen in context of expenditure. It could happen in the context of income, that is the revenue side of the budget as well. Remember the term, right? The revised estimates. Because many of you, when I'll show you a table today, you'll ask me why there's a term called as revised estimates. Because you're sitting in February and you're saying what will happen in the next 1 year. But what actually will happen is different from what you're expecting today. That is the third very important point. Now focus on the appropriation bill here. Focus on the appropriation bill. Government will provide details of expenditure in the appropriation bill. Now there is one more point here. Whatever money spent by the government of India, that money will come from the Consolidated Fund of India. There's a term called as Consolidated Fund of India. Right? What is this Consolidated Fund of India? In polity discussions, I'm pretty sure you must have come across this idea of a Consolidated Fund of India. Now, I'll not enter into polity. Let me stick to only economics. Government of India will collect incomes and will add those incomes into one fund which is called as Consolidated Fund of India. And right, whenever government wants to withdraw even a single rupee out of the Consolidated Fund of India, the government requires approval of Parliament. Government requires approval of Parliament. I'll repeat the statement. There is a fund called as Consolidated Fund of India under Article 266. Again, don't enter into polity, stick to economics. Just stick to economics. There is a fund called as Consolidated Fund. Right? In fact, there are three types of funds which you will come across in polity. Consolidated, contingency, and a public account. Right? I'm focused on only one here. Consolidated Fund of India. Government, whatever money they will collect, let's say in the form of income taxes, corporate taxes, etc., they will collect the money, put it in the Consolidated Fund of India. And as per the law, as per the constitution, if government wants to take out even 1 rupee out of this, then they will have to take the approval of the Parliament. Now, please have a look at it. I said during the budget, government introduces a bill called as an appropriation bill. What is the reason? Why is the government introducing appropriation bill? They want to spend money. Let's take a simple number. They want to spend, let's say, 30 lakh crore rupees this year. Let's say they want to spend 30 lakh crore rupees this year. Now, obviously, this 30 lakh crore rupees, they will have to withdraw from Consolidated Fund of India. Now, without the approval of the Parliament, will they be allowed to take out this 30 lakh crore rupee from the Consolidated Fund of India? Answer is no. That is the reason. That is the reason appropriation bill is introduced. It is discussed, passed, sent to Rajya Sabha, then sent to President of India. Once the President of India will sign this, the government will be allowed to withdraw the funds from CFI, Consolidated Fund of India. Right? That is another very, very important point. Fifth one, whenever you talk about budgets, there could be three types of budgets. One is called as a surplus budget. Second one is called as a balanced budget. And third one is called as deficit budget. First one is a surplus budget. Second one is a balanced budget. Third one is a deficit budget. Surplus budget simply means where the income earned by the government in that 1 year is greater than the expenditure incurred by the government. Surplus, the revenue is more than the expenditure. Second, balanced budget, wherever income is equal to the expenditure. Wherever income is equal to the expenditure, how much money they are spending is equal to the money the government is earning. That is called as a balanced budget. Deficit budget, wherever the income is smaller and expenditure is comparatively greater, it is called as a deficit budget. Now, based on what we have discussed, you might simply say, sir, I have not read, etc., etc. Based on what we have discussed, you tell me, in case of India, do we follow a surplus, balanced, or a deficit budget? Let me see how many of you remember what we have discussed. In case of India, do we follow a surplus, balanced, or a deficit budget? India, there is a deficit budget. Many of you, right, you don't remember what we have discussed. We follow deficit budget. Why? Do you remember one concept where we have discussed functioning of RBI? Tell me. Functioning of RBI. In fact, yesterday also we have discussed this. I said RBI will help Government of India to borrow from the market. Why do you think Government of India is borrowing from the market? Think of it. Why do you think Government of India is borrowing from the market? The simple reason is their income is smaller than their expenditure. They are spending more money compared to what they are earning. For example, if Government of India wants to spend 100 rupee, they have earned only 80 rupees. Think of it. If they want to spend 100, they are earning only 80 rupees. Is it possible to spend 100 with 80? Of course, no. Remaining 20 rupees, they will end up borrowing from the market. They will end up simply borrowing from the market. That is the concept of deficit budget. Now, let me ask you one more question related to current affairs. Government of USA. Let's say, how many of you are reading newspapers? Government of USA, United States of America. Do they follow a surplus budget, balanced budget, or a deficit budget? Let's see. Do they follow a surplus budget, balanced budget, or a deficit budget? They follow a deficit budget. How many or many of you are saying surplus? How? Is Government of India, Government of USA borrowing? Right? This is basically the idea. You are not reading the newspapers then. Is Government of USA borrowing or not? For what purposes? For expenditure purposes. And if they are spending the money and they are borrowing, can you say this is a surplus budget? Think of it. Right? Can you call this as a surplus budget? Surplus budget means you earn 100 rupee, you spend 80 rupees, which means you have extra 20 rupees with you. Right? But in case of USA, what is there in the newspaper? There is a negotiation that is happening between Congress and the Government of USA, where Government of USA is asking the Congress to increase the limit for them to borrow more in the market. There itself, right, the argument is there. Right, so they will also follow deficit. By the way, please understand this. Most of the countries, they follow deficit budget only. They follow deficit budget. Why? Expenditures are generally higher compared to the income. Expenditures are generally higher than the income. Okay, done. So deficit budget. In case of India, we follow deficit budgeting. Now let me come to certain important concepts. It's not actually the type of budget, concepts related to the budget. I'll discuss three concepts here. Understand this carefully. One is called as a gender budgeting. Second one is called as a zero-based budgeting. and the third one is called as outcome budgeting. Okay, one is gender budgeting, second one is zero based budgeting, and the third one is outcome budgeting, right? And in case of India, right, these terminologies are used. Let me start with the first one, gender budgeting. Now, what do you mean by gender budgeting here? Gender budgeting refers to a policy approach followed by the government to promote gender equity. I'll repeat it. Gender budgeting basically refers to a policy approach which is followed by the government to promote gender equity. Now, many of you will start asking me, sir, what is the meaning of the term equity? Equity simply means fair treatment. I'll give you example, right? Just have patience. Equity simply means fair treatment, not equal treatment, fair treatment. Now, what is the meaning of it? Let me take a very simple example. Imagine there are three people in the economy. There are three people, A, B, and C. A is earning 10 rupee per day. B is earning, let's say, 100 rupee per day. And C earns 1 lakh rupee per day. Okay, A is earning 10 rupee per day. Right, B is earning 100 rupee per day. C is earning 1 lakh rupee per day. Now, simple question to all of you. How many of you think that government should provide support to all the three? Government should provide support in the sense what? Subsidy, housing subsidy, right? Or food grains, health care, etc. Right? Is there anyone who says, sir, all the three will require equal amount of support from the government? Answer is no. Now, many of you simply say, sir, C is earning a huge amount of money, so let's not give any support to C. Very much correct. But what about A and B? Do they require support? Of course, yes. Now, let me ask you the next question. How many of you think that same amount or same value of support should be given to both A and B? Think of this, right? Do you think that will be fair? For example, food grains. Should I give 5 kgs of food grains to both of them? Of course, no. Don't you think A requires much more support from the government? Now, can I call this as a fair treatment? Let me know. Can I call this as a fair treatment? Not equal treatment, fair treatment. Now, why fair treatment is required? Why equity is required? Government of India will spend lot of money in the economy. Government will provide healthcare support. Government will provide, right, educational support. Government will provide housing support in the economy. Now, what we have observed over a period of time is, in the whole economy, whatever is the expenditure incurred by the government, the benefit of this expenditure majorly flows to the male population in the economy. If you disagree, please do let me know. This is what economic survey says. This is what even Government of India agrees to. Government of India annually will incur huge amount of expenditure. What I'm saying is, majority of the benefit of this expenditure will go to the male population in the economy. Now, that is the reason why Government of India has introduced the concept of gender budgeting starting 2005 and 2006. Under gender budgeting, what we are trying to do is, we will implement certain policies in the budget itself. I repeat, within the budget itself, we will implement certain policies in order to ensure that benefits will also start flowing to the female population in the economy. We'll ensure that the benefits will start flowing to the female population in the economy, not getting concentrated within certain population. Now, very much expected. Some of you are asking, what is wrong? I'll go back to this slide. Don't worry. What is wrong? If these benefits will flow to the male population, what is wrong? My dear, if you look at the breakup of the population, right, there is not a huge percentage difference between male as well as female population in India. But I'll give you certain data. Please tell me whether it is fair or not in case of India. As per various surveys, around 18 to 19% of the total income generated in India is earned by female population. Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. Around 18 to 19% of the total income generated in India goes to female population. Do you think this is fair? I hope you understand. And many of you will ask, if they are earning only 18 to 19%, what is the problem? My dear, there's a concept called as a gender empowerment. There's a concept called as a gender empowerment. Don't you want to empower women in India? And there is a reason for this. Many of you will ask, why are they earning only less? We'll discuss that also, don't worry. How many of you seen what is the structure of families in the rural part of India? Right, most of the rural houses in India, let's say schools are there, children have to be sent to schools. Please tell me, be honest and tell me, if there are two children, one boy and a girl, don't you think most of the times boys will be sent to the school, girls will be asked to work in the home? Yes or no? I hope you understand. Right? Again, this is not me saying it. Economic survey says this. Economic survey says this. What about jobs? What about jobs? Right? Generally will prefer the male of the house to go to the job. Female should remain in the home, work, take care of the elderly people, etc., etc., children, etc., etc. Which means, again, right, don't argue, right? Nothing to discuss here. It's a fact. Government of India accepts it. That's a reason there is a punchline. Have you heard of the punchline of the government of India? Beti bachao, beti padhao. Yes or no? Beti bachao and beti padhao. Right? Again, come back to this. Why should we follow the idea for gender budgeting? First, whenever you talk about services such as healthcare, education, etc., generally what has been observed is the male population gets more access to this compared to female population. That is one. And second one, it is the duty of the government. Government of India knows that the female population, right, is having a disadvantage, or it is at a disadvantageous position compared to the male population. So don't you think, right, the duty of the government is to ensure that whatever money they are spending, some of it will be used for female empowerment? Of course, yes. That's the second one. Third one, to promote a better usage of labor resources. Let me explain this. There are certain sectors in India where female labor actually is preferred compared to male labor. Let me know if you disagree with me. There are certain sectors, industries in India where female labor is actually preferred compared to male labor. For example, healthcare sector, hospitality sector. Yes or no? So whole idea is this. Let's promote, right, more education to the girls, women. Let's provide skill sets to them so that they'll be appropriately educated. They will also have certain skill set. They'll be absorbed in the market. That's the whole argument here, to promote a better usage of labor resources in certain sectors. Fourth one, have a look at this. I've taken this from economic survey. It has been found that in many cases, whenever gender budgeting is done, it increases women empowerment. Right? For example, imagine government of India will allocate certain funds wherein women will be identified. They will be provided with education. We will also provide them, right, with certain skill set, which means now they will get absorbed in the labor market. They'll become empowered. So this will promote women empowerment, and it reduces violence against women. Right? This is an economic survey statement. Simply take it, write it in UPSC. It has been found that with gender budgeting, women empowerment has increased, and this has led to reduced cases of violence against women. So these are some of the reasons why we follow the idea of gender budgeting. Right? This is right. Why should government of India go for gender budgeting? Now, let me give you another definition of gender budgeting. It is an exercise wherein planning is done, policies are executed, implemented, also evaluated. The budget, in a way, that empowers women and also ensures that benefits will start reaching the women. This is one more definition. If you want to remember it, please remember it. Please remember this particular definition. The gender budgeting is done in order to ensure that the budgetary policies will not increase the disparities that are already existing between men and women in the economy. And gender budgeting generally involves three very important goals. One, we will mainstream the gender issues through the government policies. Mainstream means bring focus and bring these areas into discussion. We'll throw certain light, bring these areas, bring it under focus, automatically the discussion will start upon this. Mainstream the gender issues within the government policies, promote a greater accountability of government, right? A commitment toward gender inequality, change budgets, also the policies of the governments over a period of time. These are certain important points. Now, how it is done in case of India? What has been the the process over a period of time? Please have a look at this. Do not by heart it. Please do not by heart it. This is generally how the amount of expenditure has been kept aside by the government over a period of time. I told you we introduced the concept of gender budgeting from 2005 and 6. And at that point of time, out of the total expenditure in that year, around 5% of the funds were allocated for gender budgeting. And over a period of time, it has reduced, it has kept on increasing, it has been volatile, it has been fluctuating, and as per the latest data, we are in the year 23 as well as 24. We are in the financial year 23 and 24. As per the latest budget announced by the government, around 5% of the total expenditure has been reserved for gender budgeting. Now, what do you mean by 5% here? Let me take a simple number. Imagine government of India will spend 100 rupees in the budget. The total expenditure in the budget will be how much? 100 rupees. Out of that, 5% simply means 5% will be reserved for gender budgeting. Sir, what will they do with this 5%? Let me explain this. 5% simply means how much? 5 rupees. Now, what will the government do with this 5 rupees? Please have a look at the next one. The government will use this 5 rupee to allocate the funds in different schemes. I'll repeat the statement. Government of India will use this 5 rupees to allocate, distribute these funds and use these funds under different schemes. For example, is there any scheme that you can use an example? Manrega. I've given certain examples here. Please have a look at it. Manrega, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Rural Housing, Indira Gandhi National Widow Pension Scheme. These are some of the examples of the schemes where funds are allocated by the government under the concept of gender budgeting. But if you see this particular graph, what you will realize is these are divided, that is every bar is divided into two parts. That is, let me know whether this is visible to you or not. If you look from the top, one color shade is there till here, and from here there is one more shade. Right, the whole, right, every bar is divided into two parts. Two different shades are used. What is the reason? Why do we divide it like this? Simple. Whatever schemes are covered under gender budgeting, we divide those schemes into two parts. Part A scheme and Part B scheme. Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. Whatever gender budgeting is there, we will divide them into two parts, all the schemes. Part A scheme and Part B scheme. What is the idea for Part A and Part B? Part A schemes will cover where any money that is allocated by the government. I repeat, any money that is allocated by the government, all this money under the scheme will be used only for the women. Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. Right? Any money that is allocated in this scheme, all this money will be used for only women. For example, please look at the third one here. Indira Gandhi National Widow Pension Scheme. Now let's say hypothetically, this year under the scheme 100 crore rupees allocated. Now please tell me, look at the term here. Please tell me, can you use even 1 rupee out of this for providing subsidy or a pension to male population? Right, the word is there right in front of you. Don't say yes sir, they might do it. Widow, obviously gender, right? So part A will consist of all the schemes where 100% of the funds allocated by the government will be used only for women. Whereas on the other side, part B schemes are those schemes where at least 30% of the funds allocated by the government will be reserved for women. For example, Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Under this, more than 30% of the funds allocated under the scheme will be reserved only for women. Right? That is the reason why we divide these schemes into two parts. Right? That is right, basically part A schemes as well as part B schemes. Done? Right? This is basically the idea of the concept of gender budgeting. Any difficulty here? Any difficulty? Please do let me know. Questions have been asked on this. Specifically, mains based question has been asked on this. Mains based question has been asked on the concept of gender budgeting. What is the difference between scheme A and scheme B? I'll repeat it again. The funds are allocated. Let me take a very simple example. Okay, imagine this year, right? Hypothetical example. Imagine this year, Government of India will allocate 100 crore rupees for totally gender budgeting. For total gender budgeting, Government of India will allocate 100 crore. Now, out of 100 crore, let's say 70 crore rupees will be used in certain schemes, let's say A, B, C and D, and remaining 30 crore rupees will be used in 3 more schemes, let's say E, F, G. Now, in case of E, F, G, all the 30 crore rupees will be used only for women. At least now, is it okay? All the 30 crore rupees will be spent on women only, nothing else. These schemes will be only targeting women. On the other side, these A, B, C and D schemes, these are different schemes wherein at least 30% of the funds will be reserved for women. Right, this will be called as a part A, this will be referred to as part A, and this will be referred to as part B. That is basically the differentiation. And so this is the discussion regarding the concept of right, the gender budgeting. Okay, can I go to the next one now? Outcome budgeting. Right, can I go to the next one? And please understand, although you're discussing the concept of gender budgeting in economics, can you use this in social issues paper? Think of it. Always think of this nature. Can you use the same concept in social issues or not? Yes. Can you use this even in essay paper? If there's a question, if at all there's a question on women empowerment. Right, so that's the reason, keep on incorporating, please keep on incorporating these concepts in other areas as well. Now let me start with the next one, outcome budgeting. Next one is the concept of outcome budgeting. Now what is this outcome budgeting? Let me start with a very simple example. Very simple example. Imagine you will go to your parents and ask them for, let's say, 1,000 rupee. Simple example to make you understand. The parents, before giving you 1,000 rupee, don't you think they will ask you one question? For what purpose you will need this money? And right, give me what is the result by using this 1,000 rupees. Yes or no? Will your parents ask you for what purpose you will require this money? First question will be this: for what purpose? Second will be, some of you will simply say, I want to purchase a book. Then your parents' next question will be, okay, when you purchase the book, by how much percentage your marks will increase? Please show the result to me. Now, point, these are the two questions, right? Some of you might simply say, sir, my parents have never asked. Then congrats, you have got very good parents, right? Of course, many of the households in case of India, middle income, lower middle income, even if you ask 50 rupees, 100 rupees, the first question that your parent, specifically your father, will ask you is, why? Why do you want it? Please tell me, why do you want it? And second question they will ask you is, When you use this money, what is the result of it? Now remember, two concepts, I'll use it. Now let's start. There's a concept of outcome budgeting. There's a concept of outcome budgeting. Now let's play a game here. You're the finance minister. Time is 5:45. You're the finance minister. You will allocate, let's say, 100 crore rupees to me in this financial year. Now, when you allocate 100 crore rupees, you'll simply ask me, what is the result? What is the outcome because of this expenditure of 100 crore rupees? For example, imagine this 100 crore rupees was utilized in construction of highways. I'll give a very simple example. Imagine this 100 crore rupee was used in the construction of highway. Now, can I simply say, by using 100 crore rupees, we have increased the length of highways by, let's say, 200 kilometers. Let me know. By using this 100 crore rupees, we have been able to increase the length of the highways. We have constructed highways of length 200 kilometers. I am connecting the input. I'm connecting the input with the output. This connection between the input as well as the output is called as outcome budgeting. Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. The connection that we provide between the input as well as the output, that is how much money you are spending, and as a result of this money, what is the output? What is the change in the output? Right? That connection between the input and output, it is called as outcome budgeting. Any difficulty in understanding this? Any difficulty in understanding what is the meaning of outcome budgeting? Now, for example, right, have a look at the table here. Please do not buy at the table. Table is not relevant for UPSC. Please do not buy at the table. Just make an observation. There is a name of the scheme. There is a column here, name of the scheme. I'll use a red color pen now. Name of the scheme. You will write the name of the scheme. How much is the outlay? Outlay means expenditure. And if you're going to spend, let's say, 100 crore rupees here, as a result of this, what will be the output? What will be the deliverable against the outlay will be mentioned here. So what are you doing here? You're basically connecting input with the output. So this exercise of connecting input with the output, that is money that has been spent, with the result, that is called as concept of outcome budgeting. Do we follow the concept of outcome budgeting in India? Of course, yes. Every ministry will follow outcome budgeting. That is, if you go to the ministry's website, under publications, they will tell you what has been the outcome budgeting. Meaning, in the last 1 year, how much money was spent by them. And as a result of the expenditure done by them, what is the outcome? What is the output they have been able to achieve? This is the concept of outcome budgeting. The budget expenditures are presented, okay? The budget expenditures are presented in terms of functions, programs, performance units, etc., which will reflect the government's output and its cost. That is, what is the output as a result of the input, that is the expenditure. That is the definition of outcome budgeting. Under this, we are trying to establish a relationship between what is the expenditure incurred with the result or the outcomes achieved by the government. And this is important. I hope you understand this is important. Why? If government is spending, let's say, 100 crore rupees, it is a taxpayer's money. All of you will agree? If government is spending 100 crore rupees, it is a taxpayer's money. And the taxpayer should be able to know how they are utilizing it. Are they actually constructing the road or not? Right? They are saying they will allocate 100 crore rupees for construction of the schools. Then tell me how many school buildings you have constructed. That is the whole argument here. Right? The budgets are developed based on the relationship between the funding that is provided as well as the results that are expected out of the funding. And have a look at the advantage of this. The outcome budget always will try to introduce a transparency in the system. It will also always try to introduce transparency. Point number one. Point number two, it will increase the accountability of the government officials. It will increase accountability of the ministries. because now the minister has to give the performance report. It is as good as saying performance report of the ministries, what they have been able to do with that amount of funding they have utilized, right? So it will also connect the results, right? Or it will also be able to provide the outcomes or the results of the ministries. In this, the budget allocations are always measured in terms of outcomes, right? So these are certain very important points regarding concept of outcome budgeting. Do we follow outcome budgeting in India? Do we follow it? Answer is yes. Every ministry follows outcome budgeting. Every year, the ministries will have to publish, right, the outcome budgeting document. If you do not trust me, go to ministry, go to the publication, right, website. When I say ministry, go to the publication website, the tab, you will see outcome budget document. Shall I go to the next one? Sir, I'm not getting outcome budgeting. The government will allocate the funds to you. You are a minister. Now, government says, when I have allocated funds to you, what have you done with the funds? What is the result of usage of the funds? Please tell me. Please tell me what results, what are the outcomes? If you are, let's say, Minister of Roadways, funds have been allocated for construction of roads. What is the outcome? You're basically going to tell the government, I've used 100 crore rupees and the construction of the road has increased by this much. Right? Otherwise, let's say you're the Minister of Health. Now you have used the 100 crore rupees to increase the number of beds in the hospital by so many numbers, so much percentage. You're Minister for Education. You will basically give the report card to the government. Number of children who are going to school has increased by this much. Number of schools in India have increased by this much, etc., etc. What are you doing, my dear? You're basically connecting the input, that is the expenditure, with the output. That is called as outcome budgeting. Okay, done. Next one is a concept of zero-based budgeting. Next one is the concept of zero-based budgeting. Let me start with an example. Right, again, I'll take a very simple example. Right, imagine, don't write all of this in the UPSC. Don't write all of this. Imagine until last year, your parents used to give you pocket money of 1000 rupees every month. I'll take a very normal example, then I'll come to the government. Until last year, your parents used to give you 1000 rupees pocket money. Now, today you will go to your parents, and specifically fathers will be very dangerous at this situation. You will tell your parents, I don't require 1000 rupee, I would require 1200 rupee. Nobody will ask for lesser pocket money. You will ask more pocket money only. You will ask your parents, give me more, that is 1200 rupee. Now, what is the first question your parents will ask? Forget about last year. Forget about last year. You tell me why you require 1200 rupees. Yes or no? Think of it. Have you faced this or not? Right? You'll simply try to tell them, last year you gave 1000 rupee, so increase it. Your father immediately will call you out and say, forget about last year, my dear. Tell me now why you require 1200 rupees. Right? Now, apply the same logic here. Apply the same logic. You're the finance minister. Imagine last year you allocated 100 crore rupees to me. The finance minister, last year you allocated 100 crore rupees. I'm minister for one of the ministry. This year, I'll give you two examples here. Follow this very carefully. This year, what the minister will do is basically 100 crore rupees, increase it by 20%. Simply increase by 20%. This year, you will allocate to me 120 crore rupees. Is this example okay with all of you? This is example one. And if this is done, this process is called as incremental budgeting. This is called as incremental budgeting. What do you mean by incremental budgeting? Follow the explanation carefully here. Whatever was the allocation done last year will be taken as a base, and the allocation using this base will be increased. I'll repeat the statement here again. What is the basic idea for incremental budgeting? Whatever was the allocation done previously will be taken as a base, and now using the base, the fund allocation will be increased. Is the example okay with all of you? Can I go to the next one here? Last year 100 crore rupees, we'll take it as a base, increase it by 20%. Now this year you will give me 120 crore rupees. This is incremental budgeting. Now there is one more exercise, zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting. Now what will happen in case of zero-based budgeting? Right? Here is the exercise. Last year you allocated 100 crore rupees. You will not use this. Simple. Whatever was the allocation last year, simply ignore it. Do not use it at all. Now, the finance minister will simply ask the minister, that is me. You will ask me, sir, you want to operate 3 schemes? Right? I'm saying I want to implement 3 schemes. So you will ask me, how much money you require for scheme A? Tell me. How much money you require for scheme B, scheme C? Please tell me. I will start from 0 rupees. Have a look at this. I will start from 0 rupees. If you say you require, let's say 20 crore rupees for scheme A, I will say 0 rupee plus 20 crore. If you say you require 50 crore rupees for scheme B, I will add another 50 crore rupees. If you say you will require 60 crore rupees for scheme C, I will add another 60 crore rupees. So what is the starting point? From where did I start? I ignored the previous year's allocation. It is not at all connected. I started with the base of 0 rupees. Your allocation will be 0. Now you tell me for what purposes you want money. I'll keep on adding the funds to the 0 rupees. Right? That is basically how zero-based budgeting is done. Is it okay? That is basically how zero-based budgeting is done. Now there is one question. Sir, what about the 100 crore rupee that is allocated? My dear, this is for last year. Please listen to the lecture very carefully. This is for last year. Can you use this 100 crore rupee which is allocated for financial year 23 in, let's say, financial year 24? For financial year 24, one more exercise has to be conducted. That is exactly what I'm doing. In the earlier case, imagine financial year 23 allocation was 100 crore. I used it as a base. I increased it by 20% for financial year 24. But in case of the second example, zero-based budgeting, the previous allocations are ignored. Whatever was done last year, simply ignore it. That is of no use for you now. I will start with the base of 0 rupees. And based on your requirement, I will allocate funds now. That is called as a zero-based budgeting. Now, what is the advantage of this? Do we follow this? Every now and then, right? Back in 1980s, we tried it. After that, government is not actually using it. The advantage of zero-based budgeting is very simple. The government has very limited amount of money. Now, in that situation, when the government has very limited amount of money, which of the 2 exercises you would prefer as a finance minister? Would you prefer example 1 or example 2? Let me know. Government has a limited amount of money. In that situation, would you prefer example 1 or example 2? Many of you are saying example 1. My dear, you're wrong. You should go for example 2. Why? Right, in example 1, you simply took the earlier year as a base and you increased it. Now, please tell me, do you know for what purpose this 120 crore rupee will be required? Think of it. Are you holding the government account? Are you holding the minister accountable? What if there is one more ministry which requires more funding? I hope you understand this. If you want to prioritize, imagine 10 schemes are there. You want to put certain schemes on priority and remove some of the schemes from the priority list. Can you do it in example 1? It will not be possible. But can you do this under zero-based budgeting? Can you do this under zero-based budgeting? Of course, yes. If 10 schemes are there, you will tell the minister, no, I will not allocate funds for 4 of them. For remaining 6 of them, I will allocate the funds. You tell me how much money you require. That is the advantage of having a zero-based budgeting. Any problem with this? Can I go forward? Right, so this is basically the concept of zero-based budgeting. In case of zero-based budgeting, every program is started at a zero base and every allocation has to be justified. For every rupee that you want, you will have to tell for what purpose you want. Please tell the government. Under this, each year's allocation is done independent of allocation done in the previous year. Right? Is it okay? Whatever was done in the previous year, ignore it. Focus only on this year's allocation. It will cover both existing as well as new programs. And you can have a priority of these programs. All the programs will not be priority for the government. Some of them will be priority. Funds are limited. Use zero-based. Use zero-based. You will automatically be able to target priority areas. Okay. It will provide a mechanism using which government can use resources efficiently. Will also help government in making credible allocations. Done? Right. So this is basically certain, let's say, points related to ZBB. What are the objectives of zero-based budgeting? Ensure that important tasks are given importance. That is, in simple terms, priority. Prioritize. For what purpose you want to spend money, prioritize all of these purposes. You will not be able to spend money on all these schemes. Find which is your priority. Allocations are justified. Resources cannot be wasted under ZBB. Task or activities always will be under the constant watch as well as review by the government because they have allocated the funds. You have told the government for what purpose you need money. Let's say scheme A, government has allocated 50 crores. Don't you think government will keep a constant watch on how you are using 50 crores in the scheme? That is basically the objective of ZBB. In case of India, the concept of zero-based budgeting was introduced back in 1980s, but government doesn't use it regularly. Right? Very, very rarely government of India actually uses concept of zero-based budgeting. Okay? Done? Shall I go to the next one now? Any problem? Any issues? Shall I go to the next one? I told you, during 1980s, government has used zero-based budgeting. After that, we are not using it. Okay. Are we using the outcome budgeting? Yes. Are we using the concept of gender budgeting? Yes. Okay. Why doesn't government not use it? Ask the government. Ask the finance minister. Let's see. They generally don't use it. The object is also very important. Okay, let me tell you what are the issues related to that. Right? What are the issues? On paper, every model looks very nice. Concept of zero-based budgeting, it looks very, very nice. But you please tell me, if 100 crore rupees allocated to you to implement a particular scheme, are you sure you will be able to implement the scheme within 100 crore rupees? Let me know. Are you sure you will be able to spend 100 crore rupees on that particular scheme? No. Right? That is one concern. Second concern is government is asking you for next 1 year's expenditure. Do you think you'll be able to have that kind of expertise, right, to give the expenditure to the government? And implementation part also, there's a huge delay. Generally, in case of India, infrastructure projects, etc., there's a huge delay, right? And that's the reason there are so many concerns related to these kinds of the budgeting concepts. Okay, done. Shall we go to the next one? First objective of zero-based budgeting. My dear, I told you, right? Imagine you have 10 schemes. All the 10 schemes are not priority for you. Government might simply say, pick up only top 2 priorities. I will allocate the funds to only 2 priorities. That's a basic idea, prioritization. Okay. Done. So let's start now. Preparation of the budget. Okay, preparation of the budget. Again, just only one point is important. Do not by heart. Do not try to make this picture in the UPSC exam, right? It is not relevant. Let's start. The government of India, within government of India, the ministry which is responsible for preparation of the budget is the Ministry of Finance. Please remember this. It is the Ministry of Finance, which is responsible for preparation of the budget. And when I say Ministry of the Finance, within Ministry of Finance, there are multiple departments. The department which is responsible for preparation of the budget is DEA, Department of Economic Affairs. DEA, Department of Economic Affairs. And within the Department of Economic Affairs, there is an office called as Budget Division. So it is a Ministry of Finance. Within Ministry of Finance, there is a Department of Economic Affairs. And within the Department of Economic Affairs, there is one office called as Budget Division. So it is this which is responsible for preparation of the budget. But that doesn't mean that other ministries are not involved. I hope you understand. It doesn't mean that none of the other ministries will be involved in the preparation. Right? How? Please understand this. The ministry will prepare a document. This is very famously referred to as budget circular. They will send this budget circular to all these ministries and departments. They'll simply send the circular to all the ministries as well as departments. Now, these departments and ministries, they will prepare their own estimates. They'll say, I want 100 crore, I want 200 crore for this, I want 500 crore for this, etc., etc. They will send the report, that is the estimates, back to the Ministry of Finance. Now, Ministry of Finance will hold consultations with all these stakeholders. Different departments are consulted, different ministries are consulted, right? Different industries will also be consulted. So consultation is conducted, and after that, the Ministry of Finance will decide, okay, this year total amount of money we'll spend is this much. Out of that, Ministry 1 will get, let's say, 500 crore rupees. Ministry 2 will get 800 crore rupees. Ministry 3 will get, let's say 1500 crore rupees, etc., etc., etc. This is how the Finance Ministry will finalize the budget. And once the finalization of the budget is done, and now the budget documents will be printed. Again, this is how it is given even in every book. But please understand, today we are not printing the budget documents. I hope you understand my point here. Today, if you ask me this year, sir, did we print the budget documents? No, we have stopped printing of the budget documents. Why? Government during the pandemic stated that there's a danger if I print the paper, if I print the budget on the paper, there could be a spread of the pandemic. And that is a precise reason we have shifted to a model called as a paperless budget. Right now we are following a model called as a paperless budget. What is the meaning of the term paperless budget? The budget which will be presented by the minister, it will be in a digital format. That is, if you have seen, which I would recommend, please see it. The finance minister will not be having papers in the hand when they are reading out the budget. Rather, a tablet will be kept. If you don't trust me, after the class is over, please check it online. Rather, a tablet will be kept in front of the finance minister. Finance minister will keep on scrolling like this, one page after the other page, or keep on scrolling like this. This is basically the idea of a paperless budget. We are following paperless budget for the last couple of years. This is the process of preparation of the budget. This is how budget is prepared. Now, once the budget is prepared, that is on the first working day of February, now the budget will be presented on the floor of the parliament. Come to this. Once the budget is ready, this budget will be presented by the finance minister on behalf of the President of India on the floor of the parliament. For example, those of you polity for whom it is over, it is easy. For rest of you, don't worry. This will be covered again in the polity. In case of India's parliament, we have 3 sessions. We have 3 sessions. One is called as a budget session. One is referred to as a budget session. Second one is called as monsoon session. And the third one is called as winter session. Budget session is over. Now monsoon session will start. Don't worry. Right. So budget session, monsoon session, and winter session. The first session in a new year, I repeat, the first session in a new year will always be a budget session. Okay. So after the new year, that is a calendar year, right? We enter into a new year. The first session of the parliament will be budget session. So the budget session will start. The finance minister will take these budget documents, go to the floor of the parliament, start presenting the budget documents. That is basically finance minister will present all the documents which will give you details of how much government is spending in the next 1 year, how much government is collecting in the next 1 year, right? How much is the tax expenditure? Do you remember the term tax expenditure? How much is the government's tax expenditure? What is the speech of the finance minister? What are the FRBM documents? I'll go to that, have patience. All these documents will be presented by the finance minister on the floor of the parliament. Now, please follow the arrow mark here. Please follow the arrow mark. Once, right, the budget is presented on the floor of the parliament. Now, for the next couple of days, in the parliament, there will be a general discussion. For the next couple of days, there is a general discussion. Sir, what do you mean by general discussion? Let me give a very simple idea. Follow this very carefully. If you look at the appropriation bill, I'll write it separately. If you look at appropriation bill, what is appropriation bill? It will give you details of all the expenditure incurred by the government. It will give you details about what? All the expenditures incurred by the government. Now, let's say I'll take a simple number so that you understand this. If the total expenditure incurred by the government is, let's say, 100 rupees, within this appropriation bill, the 100 rupee will be broken down into different components. Is it okay? The 100 rupees is a total. 100 rupee will be broken down into different components. For example, out of 100 rupee, let's say 20 rupees will be given to Ministry of Health for implementing one scheme. Right, out of 100 rupee. Let's say only one allocation. Next allocation will be done to, let's say, Ministry of Highways for implementation of one more scheme. That is, let's say 30 rupees is given to them. Now, another 20 rupees will be given to Ministry of, right, let's say, Education, so on and so forth. Total has to become 100 rupee. Now, please understand the point here. These individual expenditures, there's a technical term here. These individual expenditures, these are called as demand of grants. These expenditures are referred to as demand of grants. Any difficulty? These are referred to as a demand of grants. Right? What is the meaning of the term demand of grants? Finance Ministry is basically taking the permission of the parliament to withdraw 20 rupees from the Consolidated Fund of India, give it to Ministry of Health. Any difficulty? Finance Minister is asking the approval of the parliament to withdraw 30 rupees from the Consolidated Fund of India, give it to Ministry of Highways. So these expenditures or allocations which are done, these are referred to as demand of grants. And why this is relevant? Please understand this. Once the budget is presented on the floor of the parliament, for the next 3 or 4 days, generally 3 to 4 days, there is a discussion in the parliament. And during that discussion, which is called as a general discussion, during that discussion, which is referred to as a general discussion, demand of a grant cannot be discussed. Is it okay? Demand of a grant cannot be discussed. Individual expenditures cannot be discussed in the parliament. What they can discuss is basically how the budget looks like. Is the budget going to provide any benefit to poor people? Will the budget bring back black money into India? Will the budget help industries, right, to grow? Will the budget help recovery in the economy, etc., etc., etc.? Right. So general discussion is done in Parliament, that is specifically Lok Sabha. Now, once the general discussion is over, we will basically form standing committees. Right? We'll form standing committees. Why? I'll tell you. Please have a look at this. Government of India wants to withdraw 20 rupees from the Consolidated Fund of India, allocated to Health Ministry. That is the demand of grant. Now, please tell me, if there are 100 demands of grants, do you think Lok Sabha will have sufficient time to look at all the 100 demands of grants, right, let's say in a detailed manner? Think of it. Do you think Lok Sabha has so much amount of time? Right? They are very free to look at all the 100 demands of grants, right? One by one, they will take it up, look at what the government is doing, where they're spending, etc., etc. That is not possible. Now, what the government says is, as per the budgeting exercise, let's basically divide these hundreds of demands of grants ministry wise. Let's divide them. And there are standing committees in India. There are standing committees, parliamentary standing committees. Again, don't worry, you will come across this in the polity. There are around 24 standing committees, parliamentary standing committees. There's a standing committee, right, for the health. There is standing committee for petroleum and natural gas. There is a standing committee for defense, etc., etc. So there are different committees. They will basically distribute these 100 demands of grants among all of these standing committees. What is the advantage of all of this? Rather than Lok Sabha discussing or taking up all these 100 individually, then right deciding whether we should allow the government to withdraw, now all of this work will be done by different standing committees. All of these will be taken up by different standing committees. Now they will provide a report back to Lok Sabha. They will simply study and provide report to right the Lok Sabha. That is basically the idea. Done? That's a concept. For example, sir, right, very difficult to understand this. My dear, I'll give a very simple example. Right, think of this. Imagine certain work has to be done in your house. Certain amount of work. What do you prefer? Only you will do all of this work, or you will ask your family members to come together, distribute the work amongst all of them, finish the work. Which is preferable to you? Let me know. Which is preferable to you? Only you doing all the work or distribution of the work? That is exactly what you're doing here. That is exactly what you're doing. Rather than Lok Sabha taking up all of this work on its own shoulder, on its own head, they will form standing committees, divide these, allocate these different demands of grants to the standing committees, so that the standing committees will look into the demands and submit a report. That is exactly what we are talking. Done? Right? So second step is simple. The demands of grants will be allocated to the standing committees. Standing committees will study, submit a report. Now, individually, the demands of grants will be discussed and voted. Right? After the standing committees will submit the report, individually, one by one, the standing committees, the reports will be taken, and the demands of grants, should we allocate the funds or not? Report is already there, right? So they will be discussed and voted and passed. Okay, that is basically the idea. And once all these demands of grants are voted and passed, government will simply club all of these demands of grants together, and this is called as the appropriation bill. This is basically called as appropriation bill. Now, appropriation bill is passed from Lok Sabha, sent to Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha will pass it, send it to President of India. President of India will sign, right, this document. This is how the budget documents are introduced and then passed. Any difficulty? Again, don't worry, sir. What is the role of Rajya Sabha? My dear, I cannot discuss polity here. I hope you understand. I cannot discuss polity. Why Rajya Sabha is inferior in this case compared to Lok Sabha? You will understand all of that in polity. If I start discussing polity, who will discuss economy by the way then? Right, so you will understand when you discuss polity, they will tell you Rajya Sabha, whenever it is a financial matter, will always have an inferior position compared to Lok Sabha. Very simple. Right, compared to Lok Sabha, financial powers with Rajya Sabha are very, very inferior. Done? Right, that's the reason Rajya Sabha doesn't play a major role in all of this. Right, so this is how budget documents are introduced and then passed. Okay, right, so this is the passage. Now, whatever we have discussed, right, so far, compared to that, my recommendation will be focus on this discussion. This is purely economics now. Purely economics, questions have been asked. I'll show you the questions. Follow the discussion now. Now, whenever you talk about budget, please understand this. Budget can be divided into two parts. That is, the numbers in the budget can be divided into two parts. Follow this discussion. This is very important and technical to a certain extent. Now, what is this division in the budget? Let me see, I've given the picture or not. Okay, no, let me write it. The budget is divided into two parts. One is called as the revenue side of the budget or revenue account of the budget, and the second one is referred to as capital account in the budget. One is referred to as revenue account and the second one is referred to as a capital account. Now the revenue account is further divided into two parts. One is revenue receipt. One is revenue receipt. And the second one is revenue expenditure. Revenue receipt and revenue expenditure. And the capital account is also same way divided into two parts. One is called as a capital expenditure and the second one is called as capital receipts. Any difficulty here? I'll repeat it again. Right, basically the budget is divided into two parts. Right, one is called as a revenue account, second one is called as a capital account. So on what basis we'll divide? Let me explain it. Have patience. Both of these accounts are further divided into two more or two each components. One is revenue receipt, second one is revenue expenditure. Capital receipts, capital expenditure. Now, how do you understand what is the meaning of the revenue? What is the meaning of the capital? Please follow the discussion now. Whenever you talk about the term revenue, it is either referring to, I'll write it, please remember it is there in the slide as far as I'm concerned. Revenue, it is basically referring to the expenditure incurred by the government or income earned by the government in its day-to-day activity. I'll repeat it again. Whenever you talk about the term revenue, in this context of the budget, it is either referring to expenditure incurred by the government or income earned by the government during its everyday activities. Point number one. Point number two, the revenue, whenever you use the term revenue, it will neither change in the assets or liabilities of the government. It will neither change assets or liabilities of the government. Please remember these 2 points. I'll repeat it again. Whenever you use the term revenue expenditure, revenue income, I'll give you examples. It talks about expenditure or income earned by the government, expenditure incurred or income earned by the government during its everyday activities. Second, whenever you talk about revenue side in the budget, this will neither increase the assets or the liabilities of the center. It will neither change the assets or the liabilities of the center. Right? This is revenue. Come to the capital. After this, I'll start giving examples. Come to the capital. capital, whenever you talk about the capital side in the budget, it is associated with assets and liabilities. It is always associated with assets and liabilities. In terms of what? The capital side, it is always going to either increase or decrease the assets held by the government, or increase or decrease liabilities of the center. Can I start with examples? I will give you examples. Then you please tell me under which side you should put it, revenue or capital. Let's start. Government of India will issue bonds, borrow from the market. I'll repeat the statement. Government of India will issue bonds and borrow from the market. Should it be revenue or capital? It should not be very difficult now. Should it be revenue or capital? Arey Baba, some of you are saying revenue. How? Those who are saying revenue, please tell me again, don't be fooled by the term revenue. Please do not be fooled by the term revenue. Revenue for a common man is income. But please tell me, if government will issue the bond and borrow from the market, will it increase the liabilities of the government or not? Let me know. Will it increase the liabilities of the government or not? Anybody has a doubt? Should it be under revenue or capital? Straightforward, capital. Let me give you a second example. Government will collect GST every day. Government will collect taxes every day. Revenue or capital? Right? The government will collect taxes every day. Revenue or capital? Revenue. Revenue. Third example. Government will give you subsidy to purchase LPG cylinder. Think of it. Government will give you subsidies to purchase a LPG cylinder. Revenue or capital? It is again a revenue. Arey Baba, some of you are saying capital. How? Those who are saying capital, you tell me how. It's not capital, it's revenue. Is it not expenditure incurred by the government for day-to-day government activities? Let me know. Right? The subsidy that is given by the government for you to purchase a LPG cylinder, is it not a day-to-day expenditure incurred by the government? It is revenue. It is revenue. Don't get confused. Fourth example. Government of India will sell Air India, collect money. Let me know. Government of India will sell Air India, collect money. Is it revenue or capital? Capital. Anybody who says, right, there is an issue here, please do let me know. Government will sell Air India, collect money. It is part of the capital. How? If Government of India will sell Air India, will the asset of Government of India come down or no? Will the asset come down or not? Of course, yes. Right? Government of India will spend money to construct, let's say, airport. Again, capital. Why? Assets have increased. Right? That is basically the concept of capital as well as revenue. Any difficulty? Can I go forward? Any difficulty? Now, some of you are asking, what is the meaning of the term asset? This is very dangerous. I hope you understand my concern. Some of you are asking, what is asset? Very, very dangerous. Why? Did we not discuss the term assets as well as liabilities at least 10 times so far? Please revise. Assets which will have value, which will get returns to you. Okay? The liabilities are basically the repayments that you will have to do. That is basically the concept of assets and liabilities. Let's start. So now, budget is divided into two parts, revenue side and capital side. Revenue is further divided into two parts, revenue receipts, revenue expenditure. And capital is further divided into two parts, capital receipts and capital expenditure. Okay? Now, look at, right? Now, please understand this very carefully. Look at only the receipts. Please look at only the receipts. Please look at the receipts. There are two types of receipts. One is revenue receipt. Second one is capital receipt. Let's start. Revenue receipts are those incomes. Receipts are those incomes which are collected, received by the government from all the sources in their day-to-day activities. During their day-to-day activities, whatever revenue is collected by the government, that is called as revenue receipts. For example, best example, taxes. Best example for this is taxes. And please understand the next point here. These receipts do not create a liability. Right? For example, right, have a look at this. Imagine you'll purchase, right, your friend will be back now. You'll purchase this bottle and government, right, again, you're a consumer. You'll purchase this bottle. Government will collect a 10 rupee GST. Tell me now, is there a liability of 10 rupee on the government of India? Let me know. Is there a liability of 10 rupee on the government of India? Absolutely no. Are Baba, some of us saying yes. How? Right? Can you understand the term liability first and foremost? Can you understand the term liability? Liability means which is repaid, which creates a charge on the government. Right? You are paying, you're a consumer, you'll pay 10 rupee GST to the government of India. Government of India will give you that 10 rupee back. Right? Where have you studied that? Because I have not explained that. I have not taught that. Right? So understand the logic, my dear. Please understand the logic. So you purchase this bottle, you pay 10 rupee GST to the government. That GST is the income for the government. It will never repay it back. There is no charge created. This is a technical term. There is no charge created on the government. Charge created means there is no liability on the government in the future. Right? So these receipts do not create a liability for the government, nor do they reduce any assets for the government. You purchase, let's say, right, you purchase the bottle, you paid GST. Will it reduce the liability? Will it reduce the assets of the government? No. You apply for a driving license. Think of this at least now. You apply for a driving license, government will impose and collect certain charges from you. Right? Can I call this as a revenue receipt or not? You apply for passport, right? You will apply for a passport. Government will impose and collect certain charges from you. Can I call this as a revenue receipt? Of course, yes. All these are the examples of revenue receipts. They do not create any liability for the government, nor do they reduce any assets of the government. Come to the capital receipts. Come to the other side, capital receipts. Capital receipts will create a liability or result in the reduction of the assets of the government. Capital receipts will create a liability or will result in reduction in the assets of the government. Let me explain how. I've given a table here. Please have a look at it. First one is revenue receipt. I'll write numbers. Revenue receipt 1. Revenue receipt is 1. Revenue receipt can be broken down into tax receipts as well as non-tax receipts. Tax receipts are basically direct taxes as well as indirect taxes. Anybody who says, sir, what is this term direct taxes? I'm hearing it for the first time. Then my answer will be, my dear, please wake up from your coma. We have discussed all of it. And again, that was a joke, right? Don't say, sir, how can you tell me to wake up from coma? Please revise. Okay. Now, non-tax receipts, right? Basically, I've given certain examples here. Please have a look at it. One is a dividend. Let me explain what is a dividend, and then let me check whether you're reading newspapers or not. What is this idea for dividend? I've discussed this concept when I was discussing RBI. Here is a company. Company has earned profit. Company has earned profit. Now, simple question to all of you. The profits earned by the companies will belong to whom? Should be taken by whom? Owner of the company. Owner of the company. Now, owner of the company will be nothing but shareholders. Owners of the company will be nothing but shareholders. So, part of the profits will be given to shareholders. That is called as a dividend. Any difficulty? Let me know. Part of the profits will be given to the owners, that is the shareholders of the company. That is called as a dividend. Now, RBI is a company. RBI has earned profits. has RBI transferred the surplus, that is a dividend, to Government of India or not? Right? Are these dividends or not? Of course, yes. Point number one. Point number two. Once the class is over today, there is one more article which appeared in many newspapers in the last 1 week. Government of India owns public sector enterprises. There is a term called as PSE, public sector enterprises. That is where Government of India has more than 51% ownership in these companies. So public sector enterprises this year, very recently, have announced dividend to Government of India. Huge amount of a dividend to Government of India. One of the highest in the last couple of years. So argument is very simple. Dividends, they are income to the government. Dividends are nothing but income to the government. Now please tell me, when you as a owner will get the dividend, will it create any liability for you? Think of it. Will it create any liability for you? No. Will it reduce any assets of yours? Again, the answer is no. So dividends, right, are one component. Second one, interest receipt. Right, this is interesting. Please understand this carefully. Interest receipt. That is, Government of India, let's say, has given loan to a borrower, such as state government. And please remember this. Government will give loans to state governments, by the way.
Students will come out from
So Government of India has given loan to a state government. Now please understand this. The state government which has taken the loan, it will pay interest to the Government of India. Yes or no? Just like you give a loan, you will collect interest. And Government of India has given loan, right, to, let's say, a state government. State government will also give the interest to the government. Now please tell me, you will get the interest. Will it create a liability for you? Think of it. You have got the interest. Will it create liability? No. Right? On the other side, will it reduce your assets? Again, the answer is no. So can I put interest receipts on this side? Let me know. Can I put interest receipt under the revenue receipts or not? Third one, fees and fines. I give you many examples. Fees and fines, right? For example, application for passport, application for a driver's license, etc., etc. Fees and fines. And finally, external grants. Now there is a term grant here, external grant. Follow this very carefully. Right? Imagine this is the government, that is Government of India. It has taken loan from World Bank. Understand the term here. It has taken a loan from World Bank. Now please tell me, if you are the Prime Minister, you have taken loan from the World Bank, right? Don't you think it's a liability for you? I hope you understand. Is it not a liability? Of course, yes. Right, so a loan, now tell me, should a loan be on revenue side or a capital side? Point number one. Should it be on a revenue side or a capital side? It will basically become capital side. But let me give you another example. This loan has to be repaid. This loan has to be repaid by the government. But on the other side, let's say, same World Bank will provide certain money in the form of grant to the government. And what is the feature of the term grant? Right? What is the meaning of the term grant? Grants are not repaid. Remember this. Grants are not repaid. Loans are repaid. Right? Any difficulty here? Loans are repaid. They create a liability. Grants, no liability. So the external grants, the Government of India will get external grants. Right? All of these grants will be counted as a part of non-tax receipts. Done? So these are the revenue receipts. Come to the capital side. Come to the capital side. The government has given a loan and it will recover the loan. Think of it. Government of India has given a loan. Yearly they will collect interest. But after the tenure is over, let's say tenure is over, that 100 crore loan will be repaid to the government. Can I simply say assets of the government will increase? Does it make sense to you or not? Right? So basically, capital side. Disinvestment. What do you mean by disinvestment? Sale of assets. Simple. Sale of assets of Government of India. For example, tell me, sale of Air India. Can we call this as disinvestment or no? Right? Sale of certain percentage of ownership in, right, the what is that? Insurance company. Insurance company owned by Government of India. LIC. Is it disinvestment? Of course, yes. So whenever there's a sale of asset, government will sell the asset and collect the money. But when the government will sell the asset, please tell me, will the assets held by the government go down or not? Will the assets held by the government reduce or not? Hence, at capital side. And finally, borrowings. Any borrowing done by the government, whether they are borrowing from the domestic market or international market, will become part of the capital receipts. Shall I go to the next one now? Shall I go to the next point? Any difficulty so far? Now, I will start introducing more technical terms. Follow this very carefully. Now, what are the technical terms? Let me number them first. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is not an exhaustive list. It is just a representative list. Automatically, you should understand what is the asset and what is the liability. Will it fall under the capital side? Will it fall under the revenue side, etc. Now, follow this very carefully. I'll start numbering because I need it now. 4, 5, and 6. Please look at all these numbers now. Please look at all these numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And even capital receipts, I'll write it as 7. Now, can I simply say that 2, 3, 4, and 5? I repeat, 2, 3, 4, and 5 will not create any liability for the government. Let me know. I'll repeat it again. Whatever I've written in the slide, please have a look at it. 2, 3, 4, and 5 will not create any liability for the government. Whereas number 6 will create liability for the government. Now, what is the use of this? I will start writing here. Please have a look at it and tell me whether there is any confusion. 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are non-debt creating receipts. These are called as non-debt creating receipts. And right, 6 will be referred to as debt creating receipt. Debt creating receipt. Any difficulty? Some of you are pointing out, sir, what about 1? My dear, please combine 2 and 3, what you'll get? Some of you are reminding me, sir, you have forgotten 1. Yes, I have forgotten 1. But have I written 2 and 3? Have I written 2 and 3 or not? So take a sum total of 2 and 3, what you'll get? Automatically you'll get 1. Any problem here? Any problem? Right, so what I've done is, whatever income has been collected by the government, all these receipts, now I've divided into 2 parts. One is a debt creating receipt. Second one is non-debt creating receipts. Shall I go to the next one? Shall I go to the next one? And within this also, can I divide it further? Can I divide it further? That is, have a look at this. I will combine 2 and 3 and I'll call this as non-debt creating revenue receipts. Non-debt creating revenue receipts. And I'll club 4 and 5. I'll call this as non-debt creating capital receipts. Non-debt creating capital receipts. Non-debt creating capital receipts. Done? And 6th one, rather than writing debt creating receipt, can I also write it as debt creating capital receipt? Debt creating capital receipt. Let me know. Any difficulty here? Because this is important. You should understand the difference. This is important. Right? So 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are not going to create any liability. Then basically we'll refer to this as non-debt creating receipts. And 2 and 3 are non-debt creating revenue receipts. 4 and 5 are non-debt creating capital receipts. And the sixth one, which creates a liability, which creates a charge on the government of India, I'll call this as either a debt creating receipts or debt creating capital receipts. Then please remember this. Please remember this. This is important. You will have to use it. Now, let me go to the next one. Government expenditure. Right? The idea of a government expenditure. So far, what we have discussed? We have discussed, right, the receipt side, revenue expenditure as well as capital expenditure. Now, there is one more side, that is expenditure side. Revenue expenditure as well as capital expenditure. Please have a look at it. Revenue expenditures are those which are incurred by the government for conducting day-to-day government activities. These expenditures will not result in increase of the assets of the government and are considered as revenue expenditures. These do not create any kind of an asset. I'll give you example, have patience. Capital expenditure, expenditures which is incurred for creating asset with a longer time span, longer time frame, these are called as capital expenditures. Such as expenditures such as roads, ports, airports, etc. And I'll write one more statement regarding capital expenditure. Let me know whether this is correct or not. Under capital expenditures, assets, either assets will increase, assets will decrease, right? Under capital expenditure, assets will decrease, expenditure, right? My mistake. Under capital receipt, it will come down. Under capital expenditure, assets will increase. Assets will increase and liabilities will decrease. Liabilities will decrease. Any problem with this? Under capital expenditure, either assets will increase or liabilities will decrease. Now, let me give you examples. Have a look at this picture. Government expenditure. On one side, we have revenue, capital, expenditure on development of infrastructure, repayment of loans, loans given to various states or union territories. Please have a look at it and tell me this is correct or not. That is, either assets are increasing, either the assets are increasing or liabilities are decreasing. Can you find the same thing? Come to the other side, revenue expenditure. Expenditure incurred by the government to maintain law and order. Salaries paid to government employees. The salaries paid to defense personnel. The interest payment. The payment of subsidies. Welfare schemes. Pension payments. Grants for creation of capital assets. This is a specialized situation. Please give me a minute. I'll come back to this. Give me a minute. I'll come back to this. This is very, very special. Grants for creation of capital asset is very special. Give me a minute. I'll come to this. Any difficulty? Can I go to the next slide? Again, please don't get confused. Argument is simple. Listen to this very carefully. Listen to me very carefully. In capital expenditure, either assets have to increase. Now, if you are the government, you'll spend 10,000 crore rupees to construct airport. Will your assets increase or not? Will your assets increase or not? And I'll give you one more example. You have a loan from World Bank. You will repay the loan to the World Bank. Will your liability come down or not? Just apply the same logic. Apply the same logic. Exactly opposite to the idea of a capital receipt. In capital receipt, what will happen? If you remember it, I'll write a short form here. In capital receipt, right, the assets will go down, liabilities will increase. Whereas in case of capital expenditure, exactly opposite. Exactly opposite. That is capital expenditure, capital receipt. Right? And revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure and revenue receipt. In case of both, that is revenue, expenditure and receipt, government will spend money or collect money. But please understand, because of this, the assets or liabilities of the government will not change. Assets or liabilities of central government, that's very important, will not change. That is the revenue side. Done. There is a specialized concept here. Give me some time, I'll explain this also. Grants for creation of capital asset. Now, what is this grants for creation of capital asset? Please follow this very carefully. Example 1. Central government will spend, let's say, 1000 crore rupees, construct airport. Right? Start answering now. Center will spend 1000 crore rupees, construct airport. Will it be part of capital expenditure or not? Let me know. Will it be part of capital expenditure or not? Of course, yes. Asset of center is increasing. Now, second example. This is tricky. Follow this very carefully. Center will give 1000 crore rupees. Center will give 1000 crore rupees to, let's say, a state government. Right? State government. And the state government is using this 1000 crore rupees to construct infrastructure. Please answer this next question very carefully. I'll repeat it again. Center is giving this 1000 crore rupees to the state government in the form of a grant. And the state government is constructing a road or, let's say, any infrastructure using 1000 crore rupees. Question is, with this, is the central government's asset increasing? Let me know. Is the center's asset increasing? No. So should you keep it under the capital or the revenue? Now tell me. Should you keep it under the capital or the revenue? Revenue side. Does it make sense to you? Does it make sense to you or not? This will have to be kept under the revenue side. Okay, that's the reason. Although the term asset is there, we will keep this component under the revenue side for the central government. Let's start now. Sir, what is the use of all of this? This is the use. Let's go one by one. Whenever you read the budget documents, you will come across different types of deficits. Right, I've listed 6 types here. Let's go one by one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I've listed 6 types of deficits. Now, please understand this. Although I've listed 6 here, only 4 are published, followed by the government now. Only 4 are published and followed by the government. The next 2 are not followed by the government. Let me prove it. I'll come back to this. Let me prove it. Please have a look at this slide. Please have a look at this slide. How many types of deficits are provided? How many types of deficits are there? 4 types of deficits are there. Right, and this is from economic survey. This is from economic survey. Right, so government, again I'll repeat it. There are 6 types of deficits for discussion purposes. But government doesn't follow all the 6. Right now, we use only 4 of them. That is fiscal deficit, most important, the revenue deficit, effective revenue deficit, and finally, right, the primary deficit. Let's go one by one. Let's start now. First one is revenue deficit. Very, very easy, straightforward. First one is revenue deficit. The difference between the revenue expenditure and revenue receipt is called as revenue deficit. Any difficulty with the first one? This is very easy. Easiest of all of them. The difference between revenue expenditure and revenue receipt is called as revenue deficit. That is, let's say, Government of India, if this is the budget account, right? If this is a budget, we'll divide the budget into 2 components. One is the revenue side, second one is the capital side. Now you will divide the revenue side further into expenditure and receipt. Imagine under the revenue side, expenditure is 100 rupee, receipt is 80 rupee. Can I call this as a revenue deficit? And some of you are asking, what is the meaning of the term deficit? My dear, deficit is shortfall. This is an English term, not economic term. It is English term. Deficit means shortage. In this example, can I say this is a revenue deficit? How much? 20 rupee revenue deficit is there. But please understand, for sake of UPSC, you don't have to by heart exact numbers. you will have to remember that generally these deficits are given as a percentage of GDP. These are given as a percentage of GDP, right? Always these are given as a percentage of GDP. Can I prove it? Please have a look at this. Please have a look at this graph. In this graph, can you see absolute number in terms of rupees anywhere? Please have a look at it, right? Can you see in absolute rupee value anywhere? No, these are always given as a percentage of GDP. 3%, 2.9%, 4.8%, etc., like this. Always remember, if for exam purposes, you do not have to buy at absolute numbers. Just remember what has happened in terms of percentages in the last 1 year. Second one is effective revenue deficit, ERD. Effective revenue deficit. Now, what is this effective revenue deficit? If you remember, sometime I told you about a component called as a grants for creation of capital assets. I'll repeat the statement. Right, just couple of minutes ago, I taught you the concept of GCCA, grants for creation of capital asset. Now, forget about everything else. Simple question to all of you. The grants for creation of capital asset, will it create asset or not? I hope you understand. It is there in the name itself. Right? Don't worry whether center or state, I'm not asking that. My question is very simple. Using GCCA, are we creating asset or not? Of course, yes. Center is not creating it. States are creating it. Maybe panchayats are creating it. But are we creating assets? Answer is yes. So there is one more argument here. When we are using the funds by the center, given by the center to create assets, why should we include it under the revenue side? Is the argument okay with all of you? Why is Government of India keeping it under the revenue side? I'm giving you both the sides of the argument. Understand this carefully. The Government of India says, this grant that I will give is not going to create asset for me. Hence, I'll keep it in the revenue side. But on the other side, the counter argument is whether center is creating the asset or somebody else is creating the asset, this will lead to creation of asset. So should we keep it on the revenue side? Right? For example, right? Understand this much more clearly. Understand this. When you talk about the revenue, if you remember the definition of revenue, is there any addition to the assets under the revenue side? Remember this, right? Go back. We have discussed this 15 minutes ago. Right? What was the basic definition of revenue side? It will not change assets. It will not simply change assets. But when you talk about GCCA, is it creating assets or not? Is it leading to creation of asset? Of course, yes. So that is the precise reason. One more important deficit has been introduced very, very recently, right? Around 9 years ago, the concept of effective revenue deficit. And what are we doing in effective revenue deficit? I'll write the formula first here. Please have a look at it. We will simply calculate it like this. Revenue expenditure is there. But in case of revenue expenditure, there's a component called as grants for creation of capital asset. Now, because this GCCA will lead to creation of an asset, I will simply exclude GCCA. I will simply subtract the value of GCCA. And right, I'll simply write the revenue receipt. I'll simply write the revenue receipt. Now, if you take 1 and 3, please understand this. I'm using simple CSAT. If you take 1 and 3, will I get revenue deficit? Let me know. If I take 1 and 3, will I get revenue deficit? So revenue deficit, the second one, I'll write it as it is. GCCA, grants for creation of capital asset. This is called as effective revenue deficit. This is referred to as effective revenue deficit. That is ERD. Any difficulty here? Any difficulty? And I hope you have understood why we have introduced one more right after revenue deficit, that is effective revenue deficit. So our argument was very simple. When you calculate revenue deficit, one of the components of revenue expenditure is grant for creation of capital asset. But the revenue by default means no assets. Is it okay? Revenue by default means no asset. But we are creating asset using GCCA. So what I'll do is, from the revenue expenditure, I will take out the component of grants for creation of capital asset. And I'll write the other side, that is the revenue receipt as it is. That's nothing but revenue deficit minus grants for creation of capital asset. That is basically EID. Now let me ask you one more question. If I give you two numbers, revenue deficit and effective revenue deficit, which will give you a better quality data? Think of it. If I give you revenue deficit as well as an effective revenue deficit, which one do you think is going to give you better quality data? Which means, understand this, revenue basically means what? Day-to-day expenditures of the government, day-to-day income collection of the government. No creation of assets should happen under the revenue. So don't you think if you look at effective revenue data, that is a better quality data compared to revenue deficit? Shall I go to the next one? Okay. Third one, fiscal deficit. Third one is fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is nothing but the borrowings of the government. Fiscal deficit is nothing but how much is the borrowings done by the government. How much is the liability of the government. How do you calculate how much is the borrowings of the government? Right? Understand this carefully. How do you calculate how much is the borrowings of the government? I'll simply calculate on one side total expenditure incurred by the government. Done? Please do let me know. On one side, I'll calculate total expenditure. And total expenditure is what? Revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure. And on the other side, I will calculate the incomes earned by the government. Incomes earned by the government. Now, what are the kinds of incomes earned by the government? Government will basically conduct a disinvestment. Government will conduct a disinvestment. Government will recollect loans that they've issued. Recollect. Please understand. Recollect loans that they've issued earlier. Now, don't you think generally expenditure is greater than these kinds of incomes? Think of it. Expenditures is greater than these kinds of incomes. That is, if I were to write a number, expenditure could be, let's say, 200 rupees. These incomes, I'll use a technical term now, non-debt creating receipts. Is it okay? Total expenditure is very simple. On the other side, when I say these kind of incomes, can I say non-debt creating receipts? Any problem? Let me know. Non-debt creating receipt. That's the reason I did a circus earlier. Right? What is a circus? Do you remember this? Where is that? Okay. Do you remember this? This is a circus that we did earlier. That is, we divided the whole incomes earned by the government into different components. Right? One component we said debt creating receipts, and the second one is non-debt creating receipts. Right? Is it the income earned by the government? Think of it. Sixth one, is it income earned by the government? Can you say this is the income of the government? No, there's a borrowing. Right? So what you will do is, on one side, you will take total expenditure. From that, let's say your total expenditure is 200. From this, right, basically what you have done is, you have earned incomes, let's say 160 rupees. The difference between this, you will simply borrow from the market. Any difficulty? This is non-debt creating receipt. This is a total expenditure. The difference between that, you will borrow from the market. This is called as fiscal deficit. This is called as fiscal deficit. Shall I go to the next one? Shall I go to the next one? Let me know. Shall I go to the next one? We'll finish all these deficits and then we'll take break. Have patience. Have patience. Right? You should be able to handle these classes now. This is, I believe, around 10th class. You should be able to handle, the 11th class, right? Or 12th class. Right? So argument is simple. Right? Otherwise, forget about this. Imagine you are the person. You are spending income of, you are earning income of 100 rupee. You have expenditure of 150 rupees. Forget about government. You tell me now. Right? Forget about the government. You tell me. You are earning 100 rupee. You want to spend 150 rupees. Is it possible? Is it possible? Answer is no. Now what you will do? You will borrow 50 rupees. Yes or no? You will borrow 50 rupees. That is exactly what the government is doing here. Any difficulty even now? Government wants to spend 200 rupees, but they have earned only 160. Can they use 160 to spend 200 rupees? No. So they will have to borrow from the market. But what is this 200? Total expenditure. What is this 160? Can I call this as non-debt creating receipt? Can I call this 160 as a non-debt creating receipt? Because if you basically take any other component within this, it becomes a liability. Liability is borrowing. So I'll simply write the incomes earned by the government are non-debt creating receipts. Any kind of income where there is no repayment, they will come under the non-debt creating receipt. Right? For example, let me ask you a very simple question now. Government of India will sell Air India. Can I count it as a part of non-debt creating receipt? Think of it. Government of India will sell Air India and collect, let's say, 200 crore. Is it part of non-debt creating receipt? Some of you are saying no. Then basically you have not even understood what is the meaning of the term non-debt creating receipt. Non-debt creating means there is no liability, my dear. You do not have to repay the amount. Right? Government of India has sold Air India. For that, they will collect money. Will Government of India repay the 200 crore rupees? Right? Again, I do not, generally I'm actually puzzled by these kind of answers by the students. Because after finishing all of this only I went to fiscal deficit. Right? So understand the logic here. Let me ask you one more question. Government of India will collect income taxes from you. Can I count it as a non-debt creating receipt? Any problem now? On the other side, Government of India will take a loan from World Bank. Can I count it as a non-debt creating receipt? No, absolutely no. Government of India, again, some of you are saying yes. Can you understand the term loan? Right? And if you still have a doubt, please give a loan of, right, let's say 10 lakh rupees to me. And if you come and ask me 10 lakh rupees, that's a liability, my dear. So have a look at this. Right? So on the other side, one more example. Government of India will issue a G security of 1000 rupee. Liability or not? Of course, yes. Right? So whatever is the liability, whatever is the borrowing of the government, it will be nothing but fiscal deficit. So total expenditure minus non-debt creating receipt, that is called as fiscal deficit. Done? Any difficulty here? Any difficulty in understanding the term fiscal deficit? In fact, Government of India focuses too much on fiscal deficit. They will always try to bring down the fiscal deficit. Let me go to the next one. Primary deficit. Let me go to the next one. Primary deficit. Now, before you look at the formula, understand this very carefully. Imagine you are the government. This year, you are earning income of 100. You are also spending 100 rupees. Simple. This year, you are earning income of 100. You are also spending 100 rupees. Now, can I simply say, you have very good powers of financial collection. Your financials are very efficient. Any doubt in the statement? Please do let me know. You are earning 100 rupees. Your expenditure is also 100. Your financials are very efficient. Yes or no? Whatever money you are earning, it is sufficient to take care of your expenditures. But here comes the problem. Please understand the next point carefully, slightly technical. Here comes the problem. Government of India, let's say, will, right, I'll take a very simple example here. Will spend total 150 rupees, 100 rupee for various schemes which will be launched now or which are there in the existence, and another 50 rupees for repayment of interest or payment of interest. Simple question to all of you. Simple question, by the way. Can I say that the payment of interest is because Government of India has taken the loan in the past? Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. Right? The 50 rupee interest that the government is giving, it is because government has taken the loan in the past. Now, please have a look at it. If I simply call this scheme as A and interest as B, can I now say that A is because of current year expenditure? A is because whatever government is doing this year, they are incurring this expenditure. But B is because the government activities of the past. This is important. Books will not discuss this. Focus. Right? A is because what government is doing in this year. B is because what has the Government of India done in the past. Any difficulty? Can I go to the next one? Can I go to the next one? Third point. This was the second point. Third point. Follow this carefully. Imagine your income is 100 rupee this year. Your income is 100 rupee this year, which means your incomes are sufficient to take care of this year's activities. Yes or no? I'll repeat it again. Imagine the non-debt creating receipts. I repeat, non-debt creating receipts are 100 rupee. Your expenditure this year is 100 rupee. Can I say that your income is sufficient to take care of your activities of this year? Now, can I say your revenues or your incomes are very efficient? Your revenue generation capacity is very good. Now, right, this is where technicality will enter. You will also borrow. Yes or no? You will also borrow. Now follow this very carefully, slightly technical. Understand this carefully. You will borrow from the market. I'll give you example one. You will borrow 50 rupees. And imagine all the 50 rupees is to pay interest. Okay? You'll borrow 50 rupees and all the 50 rupees you will use it to pay interest. Example 2. You'll borrow 50 rupees. Out of the 50 rupees, you're using 20 rupees to incur expenditure for current year activity. You will incur that 20 rupees to incur expenditure for current year activity. And remaining 30 rupees, you will use it to pay interest. I will not ask you question, but I'll give you a statement. Think of this very carefully. In case of example 1, whatever you borrow, you're using it to pay interest. It means your current year income is sufficient enough to take care of your current year expenditures. Let me know, yes or not. I'll repeat the statement again. Example 1. Focus on example 1. Example 1, you are borrowing 50 this year, but it is to pay for interest on the loans that you have taken in the past, which also means in this year, whatever income you have generated, it is sufficient to take care of your current year expenditures. Whereas example 2, you have borrowed 50 rupees, but out of that 50 rupees, you are using 20 rupees to take care of your current year expenditure, which means your revenue potential, your revenue generation capacity is lower. Any problem in understanding this? Now, if you are the Prime Minister, you please tell me, would you prefer example 1 or example 2? If you are the Prime Minister, would you prefer example 1 or example 2? Many of you are choosing example 2 despite explaining so much. Many of you are choosing example 2. No, my dear, you should not choose example 2. You should choose example 1. Why? What is the implication? Please read the implication. Understand the implication here. Don't worry about numbers. Understand the inference. What is the inference? You are borrowing, but this borrowing is not to take care of your current year expenditure. You're launching a scheme. You will have sufficient amount of your own money, your income, to launch a scheme. You're constructing airport. You have your own sufficient income sources, right, to construct an airport. Your incomes are efficient enough. Whatever you are earning, it is more than sufficient to take care of your current year expenditure. That is the implication of example 1. Any difficulty even now? Any difficulty even now? Whereas in case of example 2, you're borrowing 50, but out of 50 rupees, 20 rupees, you are using that to launch a scheme. But what does it mean? If you're using 20 rupees out of borrowing to launch a scheme, does it not mean that in this year, your revenue generation capacity is weaker? Can I go forward now? Can I go forward at least now? Right? This is very important. Please understand. Now come back to the fiscal deficit. I'm sorry, come back to the primary deficit. Please have a look at the primary deficit formula. Primary deficit is equal to fiscal deficit minus interest payment. And what is the implication of a primary deficit? Right? Imagine this. I'll give the same number that we have used earlier. Fiscal deficit is, let's say, 50 rupees. And all the 50 rupees, you have basically used it for making interest payment. In this case, primary deficit will be how much? 0 rupees. Now, can I simply say, have a look at this. Can I simply say a primary deficit represents how much of the borrowings will be used by the government to take care of current year expenditures? Any difficulty? I'll repeat it again. Right? A primary deficit, what is the implication of a primary deficit? What is the meaning of the primary deficit? You will borrow from the market. How much of your borrowing you will use it to take care of your economic activities this year? Your expenditures for this year, how much of the borrowings you are going to use it? And can I simply say, if your primary deficit is 0, it simply means whatever money you are borrowing, none of it you will use it for this year, which also implies that your revenue capacity is very good. Your potential to generate revenue is very good. Okay, that is the implication of primary deficit. Now let me ask you a very simple question. Between fiscal deficit and primary deficit, which is a better qualitative indicator? Let me know. Between fiscal deficit and primary deficit, now tell me which one will give you a better quality information. It is primary deficit, my dear. Many of you are saying fiscal deficit. Despite discussing so much, giving you so much of a story, you're saying fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit will simply tell you how much you're borrowing. I hope you understand. Fiscal deficit will simply tell you how much money you're borrowing. But can that tell you out of that borrowing, how much is for payment of interest, how much it is for taking care of current year's expenditure? Can the fiscal deficit give you this data? Absolutely no. Right? Only the primary deficit will tell you. That is, let's say fiscal deficit is 100 crore rupees, and you will come across primary deficit of, let's say, 40 crore rupees. What is the meaning of it? What is the meaning of it? Out of 100 crore rupees that you have borrowed, you are simply using 40 crore rupees to take care of your current year expenditures. And now can I simply say, if the primary deficit and fiscal deficit gap is wide, I repeat, if the primary deficit and the fiscal deficit gap is very wide, if the gap keeps on increasing, it shows that the finances of the government, the revenue generation capacity of the government is improving. Last statement, by the way. After this, we'll take a break. Right? Can I say this statement? If UPSC will give you this statement, any problem with that? Right? So this is the inferences. Right? Please check. Please check. These are the inferences. Please read it very carefully. Right? So that is the idea. I'll repeat the statement. Listen to the lecture very carefully, my dear. If the gap between primary deficit and fiscal deficit widens, this means the finances of the government of India, the finance, that is revenue generation capacity of government of India is improving. Yes or no? Yes, by the way, it is correct. Right? It will be highest when the gap between primary deficit and the fiscal deficit is very high. Gap means what? The difference. That is what I've written here. Right? The difference is nothing but the gap. Okay, done. Right? So let's take a break now. Let's take a break. Let me address your questions first. What is emergency payment system? Again, that's just a proposal. In today's newspaper, there was one proposal. Again, the RBI is trying it out. When they will do it, let's see. I want to know, if NBFCs didn't give security, then why any investor should invest under it? My dear, NBFCs offer a higher rate of interest to you. Will you not be attracted by it? Of course. What is the role of interest rate in ALM? Right? Interest rate is the outcome of ALM. Right? The ALM means asset liability mismatch. And right, let's say I'm a bank. I've collected 100 rupee deposit from you for 1 year. I've given it as a loan for 10 years. After 1 year, you will come. You want the 100 rupee back. But when you gave the deposit, the rate of interest was 5%. I will return 100 rupee by collecting it from some other customer. I will offer the other customer 6% rate of interest. Automatically, the interest burden on the bank will increase because of ALM. Okay. Which type of budget is better? There is no universal answer to this. Right? Don't you think for a developing country such as India, capital expenditure requirements will be very high. And because of a higher capital expenditure, automatically your fiscal deficit might also increase. Okay. Are there any countries which follow surplus budget? Yes, there are very few countries. Generally, you will find these kind of countries in the Middle Eastern, Middle Eastern map as such. ZBB was used in what scenario by government? 1980s, there was a precarious, right, revenue position of the government of India. Financial position of the government of India is very, very fragile. That is the point of time when we introduce the concept of ZBB. Are there any topics within Nitin Senghania for skipping? Again, I've answered this umpteen times. I'll answer it again. Do not read any static book, any reference book from the first page to last page. What we discuss in the classroom, read. Something comes up in the current affairs, read. That's more than sufficient. Recovery of loans. Government of India has given a loan and they have recollected it. Automatically, assets of the government will increase. Can fiscal deficit be calculated by calculating debt creating receipt? Of course, yes. But how do you arrive at debt creating receipt? Right? First, you will know how much is your total income. Then you know how much is your expenditure. The difference between that, government will end up borrowing. That is debt creating receipts. When NABFID is part of the government, will it offer to private? Of course, yes. They are going to offer loans to many developers. What is the implication of fiscal deficit? If the fiscal deficit increases automatically, right, the borrowings of the government increases. In the future, there will be repayment liability, etc. Effective revenue deficit. I'll repeat it again. The idea of effective revenue deficit is, under the revenue side of the budget, we keep grants for creation of capital asset. So under the effective revenue deficit, because the grant for creation of capital asset is going to create asset, we are going to subtract it. Very simple. We are going to subtract it. That is effective revenue deficit. If we have to take loan to pay for previous interest, that is bad, as we are not capable to even pay interest on borrowing, let alone the principal. Yes, borrowing, right? Understand this. Borrowings represent a liability. But please understand, will government of India have sufficient amount of revenues to take care of expenditure every year? Think of that as well. Do you think government has sufficient amount of income to spend all the requirements in the market? Of course no. There will be the implication, or there's a compulsion on the government. USA, the most developed economy in the international market, is borrowing, and you're talking about government of India. So of course there'll be a force, or there'll be a compulsion to borrow in the market. Surplus budget basically is a situation wherein the expenditure is lesser than the income, right? Expenditure is lower than the income generated by the government. Okay, done. So let's take a pause now. Let's take a pause. I'll restart at 7:38. I'll restart at 7:38 p.m. Take a break now. Okay. Welcome back. Am I audible? Am I audible? Please do let me know so that we can start the discussion. Okay, let's start. So RD, ERD, FD, and PD, all the four are done. And in fact, if you remember it correctly, I told you this. Government of India, whenever you talk about the finances of the government, they follow these four. Right? You can see fiscal deficit. You can see the revenue deficit, effective revenue deficit, as well as primary deficit. Now let me continue. Fifth and sixth concepts are there, but Government of India does not use it now. One is called as a budget deficit. Second one is called as monetized deficit. Budget deficit as well as monetized deficit. Now, what is this idea of a budget deficit? Now, budget deficit is difference between the total expenditure as well as total receipts. Now, many of you will start typing. Before typing, please look at it very carefully. Some of you will start typing, sir, then what is the difference between a fiscal deficit and the budget deficit? Can you see the difference here? Please tell me. Can you see the difference here? I'll put it in a right number also, but let me know. Can you see the difference? Both are not on the same. Non-debt creating receipts as well as total receipts are not one and the same. Right? Just to put in context, what are the total receipts? Please go back. Please revise. It's a kind of revision for you. What are the total receipts? Total receipts are debt creating as well as non-debt creating. Any difficulty? Total receipts are debt creating as well as non-debt creating. Whereas in case of fiscal deficit, we are simply writing non-debt creating. Then what is this idea of a budget deficit? Let me explain this. After independence, or let's say since independence, in case of India, we followed only two types of deficits. Only two. And rest of them have come over a period of time. The two types of deficits were, one deficit that was calculated was a revenue deficit. Second one was budget deficit. And in the context of budget deficit, what we used to do is, imagine this is the finances of the Government of India. Government of India has a total expenditure of, let's say, 100 rupees. Simple. Government of India has the total expenditure of 100 rupees. Then it will start calculating how much revenues they have. And this is the calculation they used to do. Right? Let's say hypothetically, they used to get through taxes. I'll just give a hypothetical calculation. Please do not by heart this. The total taxes as well as, right, let's say the non-taxes used to come at around, let's say, 70 rupees. Then government used to borrow, let's say, 20 rupees. And the government used to borrow 20 rupees. Now, please tell me, if you have a total expenditure of 100, you have the total revenue of 90 rupees. Is it possible to spend 100 with 90? Have a look at it. Is it possible to spend 100 rupee with 90 rupees? And by the way, receipts already includes borrowing done by the government. Some of you are saying yes. How? Please tell me. If you have 90 rupees, how can you spend 100 rupees using 90 rupees? Please educate me on that. It's not possible. You have 90, you want to spend 100, it's not possible. And there is a shortfall here despite government borrowing. Can you see this? Despite government borrowing also, there's a shortfall. Now, this shortfall is called as a budget deficit. This shortfall is called as budget deficit. Now, can you understand the difference between fiscal deficit and budget deficit? Don't say both are one and the same. Absolutely no. In fiscal deficit, we will not even count borrowings done by the government. In fact, we will only count non-debt creating receipts, and the difference between the total expenditure and the non-debt creating receipt would give you the fiscal deficit. But in the budget deficit, government expenditure would be higher than total revenues of the government, including the borrowings already done by the government. That is called as budget deficit. How much is the budget deficit here? 10 rupee. How much is the budget deficit here? 10 rupee. Now, what government used to do is, Government of India would simply borrow this 10 rupee from Reserve Bank of India. Government of India would simply borrow this 10 rupee from Reserve Bank of India. Now, please understand the difference here. We will call this as monetization of deficit. We'll call simply this as monetization of deficit. And we will call this as budget deficit. Any difficulty here, please do let me know. Right, number is same. 10 rupees the budget deficit. Right, 10 rupee is the borrowing of the government of India from RBI. But this 10 rupee is called as a monetization of the deficit. And this 10 rupee is called as a budget deficit. Can I go forward? And please tell me, do we follow monetization of the deficit now? Since we have discussed already all of this, right? We have discussed the second part of this. Do we follow monetization of the deficit in India? No, we do not follow monetization. Some of you are saying yes. Very bad. Very, very bad. And I don't know this particular batch. Many of the students do not right, basically revise. So does government of India follow monetization of the deficit in India? Answer is no. Sir, you have not taught. Some of you will start typing. Sir, you have not taught. Don't lie, etc., etc. Please open yesterday's PPT. I've given this also. In fact, just to make you understand, I used colors, different colors. Where it was not allowed, I used a red marker. Where it was allowed, I used a black marker. In fact, I wrote in front of that also. Do we follow monetization of deficit in India? No, we do not follow. Right? Why? We do not follow even the budget deficit in India. And one more reason is, whenever you go for monetization of the deficit, the money supply in the economy increases and that could cause inflationary trends. That could simply cause inflationary trend in the economy. That would increase the money supply, cause inflationary trend. That's a reason we do not follow monetization of deficit. We do not even follow budget deficit. Because please tell me, look at this. I'll use a different color now. Can you see a different color? Red color marker. Please look at in the rectangle, right, with the red color. Please tell me, is a budget deficit a correct indicator of how much government is borrowing? Let me know. Please have a look at it and tell me. Is a budget deficit number is 10 rupee? Is it that a correct indicator of how much government is borrowing? What is the liability of the government? And two of you are saying yes. No, my dear, you are wrong. Why? Budget deficit is 10 rupee. Is it a liability? Is it the only liability of the government? What about 20 rupee here? What about 20 rupee? 20 rupee is also borrowing. That is also liability. That is a precise reason we have discontinued the concept of budget deficit and we have introduced the concept of fiscal deficit. And now, don't you think fiscal deficit will represent what is the true borrowings of the government in that year? Let me know. Will the fiscal deficit represent what is the total borrowings of the government in that year? Will it represent or not? Right, done. That's the reason we have introduced fiscal deficit. We have discontinued budget deficit. And as such, we do not even follow monetized deficit because it will cause inflationary trend in the market. So these are the 6 types of deficits. All the 6 are important. 5 and 6, just to check your concept, UPSC can ask you. But first 4 anyways are there in the discussion every day. Right? Or let's say every year in the budget document, all the 4 will be mentioned. Okay, done. Can I go to the next one now? This is a discussion regarding the budget. Next, just have a look at the representation here. Please do not by heart any numbers. Please do not by heart any numbers. And when you say repeat, I don't know what you're talking about. Should I start from what is the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics? When you say repeat, please tell me in which context. Right? It's very difficult for me to understand what you're asking. What is the exception? I'll come to that. I have not yet come to the idea of a FRBM. Have patience. I will tell you. If I don't teach, you are very free to ask me at the end of the chapter, sir, you said you will discuss this. You did not discuss. Please tell. I will explain. But is the chapter budgeting over? Is the chapter of budgeting over? Not yet over. I'll discuss. Have patience. what is the budget deficit? I'll repeat it again. That's the reason I want you to focus on the discussion, my dear. Can you see the difference between a total receipt and a non-debt creating receipt? Start from the basics. Is there a difference between saying total receipts of the government and only the non-debt receipt or non-debt creating receipts of the government? Of course, yes, there is a difference. What is the difference? When you simply say total receipts, borrowings of the government, right, will be included. Where you say non-debt creating receipts, borrowings of the government are not included. That is exactly what I told you in the next point. Imagine government of India has to spend 100 rupee. It will basically count non-debt creating receipts 70 rupees. It will borrow from the market worth 20 rupees. So total receipts of the government is 90, but the total expenditure is 100. So total receipt, total expenditure, the difference between that is called as budget deficit. That is basically the idea of budget deficit. Okay, done. But please have a look at it. Whenever the budget is presented by the government, this is how the representation is done. That is, from where does the government of India get its 1 rupee? 1 rupee simply means total income is, let's say, 1 rupee. And on the other side, where does the government of India spend its 1 rupee? Now here, I'll just tell you certain points. Please remember this. Point number 1. This year, this is for the current financial year. Do not by heart this. Next year, when the budget will be announced, please by heart for next year's exam, the revenue sources, the income sources. And within the income sources, please by heart how much taxes will come from which sources. Right? For example, what kind of question can be asked? They will ask you to arrange these taxes in ascending order. Right? Of course, to contribution to the government, or descending order, etc. Questions have been asked, probability is there, don't take a chance, by heart it. On the other side, but anyways, look at one observation here. Please make one observation. Can I say out of the total income generated or total money collected by the government, a large chunk of it comes from taxes? Let me know. I'll repeat the statement here again. Out of the total money that is collected by the government, a large chunk of this, a large percentage of this comes from taxes. Right? If you want to understand, please have a look at this. Borrowings 34 paise. Okay, borrowings are 34 paise. Non-debt capital receipts is 2 paisa. And non-tax revenue 6 paisa. So 34 plus 6, 40, 40 plus 2, 42, which means 58%. 58% of the total money collected by the government comes from taxation. Now, do you remember one statement that I had given you when I was discussing taxation? Why does government impose and collect the taxes? I had said it will impose and collect the taxes because the taxes are a very, very important source of money for the government. Right? 58%, mind you, 58% for the current financial year, government will collect it from taxes. That's the reason taxes are so important for the government. Come to the other side of the picture. Where does the government spend its money? Please make an observation on interest. Please look at interest payment. If government this year will spend 1 rupee, 20 paisa, that is 20% out of it, government will be spending in the form of interest payments. How many of you think that this is a very small number? Imagine, how many of you believe that this is a very, very small number? And if you want to understand in terms of absolute rupees, the total, right? Have a look at this. Total expenditure for the current financial year is 45 lakh crore rupees. Total expenditure for the current financial year is 45 lakh crore rupees. Out of that, take 20%. That is around 9 lakh crore rupees. Is the logic okay? I'm simply doing a simple CSAT calculation here. Simple CSAT calculation, 1/5. 20% means 1/5. Around 9 lakh crore rupees, government is simply paying it in the form of interest. So interest burden on the government of India is very, very high. Apart from this, we also spend a lot of money on various schemes, right? Around 25%, like basically on the schemes. We also provide finance commission transfers. That's the next point of discussion. Please remember, finance commission transfers are 9 paise, right? States share in the taxes is 18 paisa, and there are many other expenditures. So this is how generally government of India will end up spending money in 1 year, right? But again, please let me know, if government of India, I told you, is going to spend 45 lakh crore rupees, these are budget estimates, any guarantee after 1 year expenditure will be exactly this amount? Think of this. Any guarantee whether the expenditures after 1 year will be exactly this amount? Absolutely no. Can you see one more number here? Please have a look at it. Can you see one more number? Revised estimates. That is, understand the logic here. It's a very simple idea. Understand this. On the 1st of February 2023, Government of India announced budget. Done. But this budget that was announced, is it for current financial year? Let me know. The budget that was announced on the 1st of February 2023, is it for the current financial year? No. It is for the next financial year. Next financial year, can I write 23 and 24? Is it okay? Can I write it as 23 and 24? That is the budget estimate. Can you see the budget estimate here? That is a budget estimate. But you are on the 1st February 2023. Can I say you are still in the financial year 22 and 23? You're still in the financial year 22 and 23. So for the current, some of you are saying no. My dear, you're on 1st February 2023. Are you not in the financial year 22 and 23? Of course, yes. Right, of course, yes. So for the current financial year, you will revise the estimates. Can you understand why we are revising now? For the current financial year, we are revising the estimates. Now, point number 3, can I also say that the financial year 21 and 22, it is already over? Let me know. Financial year 21 and 22, it is already over. Can you change income for 21 and 22 now? Can you understand my question now? Can you change how much taxes you have collected for 21 and 22 on 1st of February 2023? No. So for the year which is already over, I will give you actuals. For the year which is which is already over, I will give you actuals. Any difficulty in understanding? For which year we will announce budget estimates? For each year we will announce revised estimates. For each year we will give you the actuals. For example, let me take another hypothetical example. Tell me. Follow this very carefully. Imagine we are on the 1st February 2020. Right? Imagine we are on the 1st February 2020. Can I now say that I will give budget estimates for 2020 and 2021? Tell me, any difficulty now? Right? I will give you the budget estimates for 20 and 21. Second, because I'm there in the current financial year, I will give revised estimates for 19 and 20. Because we are still in the current financial year, right? Can you understand current financial year? The current financial year has started from 1st of April 2019 and will finish on 31st March of 2020. And is it okay if I say basic high school now? 1st of February is before the 31st of March. So we are not finished. We have not yet finished current financial year. So for the current financial year, I will give you revised estimates. Previous financial year, it is already over. Previous financial year is already over. So I will give you actuals of the previous financial year. That would be 18 and 19. So this will be revised. This will be budget estimates. B, budget estimates. So these three sets of documents are always given. Financials are always given by the government. Okay. Now just have a look at the budget deficit trends or the deficit trends. Fiscal deficit, how it has moved. Right, primary deficit, how it has moved. Just make an observation. Please do not by heart. Trust me when I say this. Don't waste your time. Please do not by heart. Right, even if you try to by heart, please tell me, will you be able to remember these decimal numbers? Let me know. Right, will you be able to remember these decimal numbers? Absolutely no. Please don't waste your time. Then what is the use of this? UPSC will ask a trend-based question like this. The fiscal deficit in the last 5 years has consistently increased. Has it increased? Make an observation. The revenue deficit for the last 5 years has consistently decreased. Has it? Make an observation. Rather than 5 years, they will give you 10 years. The fiscal deficit in the last decade has consistently decreased. If it has, please have a look at the graph and tell me. Neither it has increased continuously, nor it has fallen continuously. It has been fluctuating. It has been fluctuating. It has increased, decreased, increased, decreased. Right? These kind of trend-based questions have been asked by UPSC. Please be very careful. Now, let me introduce one more concept with all of you. The term called as public debt. There is a term called as public debt. Now, please understand this very carefully. To understand the term public debt, let me start with a very simple example. Imagine last year I borrowed 100 rupees from you. Let's start. Last year I borrowed 100 rupees from you. I have not repaid it. This year I will borrow another 500 rupees from you. I'll repay it in the future. Now please tell me, what is my total liability here? Right, last year I've taken 100, I met to repay. This year I've taken 100, I met to repay. Can I simply say total liability for me here will be 600. Now let me introduce the same concept in the context of the government. Government of India borrowed 100 rupee last year. Government of India borrowed 600 rupee, 500 rupee this year. Can I simply say the liability of the government will be 600 rupees here? Any difficulty now? Any difficulty now? I'm using your same answer, right? You said 600, I'm using the same answer, right? So the government has borrowed in every year. I'm taking the sum total of all of these and I'm calling this as a liability. I'll simply call this as a liability. Many of you are saying, sir, interest, interest, interest. My dear, please understand, interest is paid in the same year. Interest is paid in the same year. Government will simply pay the interest in the same year. Right? That's the reason. So whenever you talk about the term public debt, it is not equivalent to fiscal deficit. Is it okay? It is not equivalent to fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is a part of the public debt. Let me show it to you. This is as per the latest economic survey. And please do not by heart it. Please do not by heart it. It is of no consequence for UPSC. Understand the concept using the table. Now, what is given? What is given here? There are three components. Make an observation. A is written. A is there. Right? B is there. And C is there. And all the three are important. Let's start. A is there. B is there. And C is there. Now, what is this idea for A, B, and C? First one, the term public debt. What is the meaning of the term public debt? Public debt basically refers to the total liability that the government of India will repay using the money from Consolidated Fund of India. I'll repeat it again, right? All these are very important concepts. Understand this. The public debt refers to the liability of government of India, which they will repay using Consolidated Fund of India. That is, from the Consolidated Fund of India, they will take the money, use it to repay. And what are the components of the public debt here? Right? The internal debt as well as external debt. Did we discuss internal and external earlier? Please go back. Did we discuss the concept of internal debt and external debt? And now, please have a look at the next point as well. If you take the total public debt, can I say that internal debt is the highest? External debt is very, very small. This is what you're supposed to remember. Right? This is what you're supposed to remember. Do not by heart it. Please do not by heart numbers. Internal debt is very, very high. External debt is very, very small. Right? Generally understand this. The internal debt accounts for around 95% of the public debt. And the remaining 5%, remaining around 5% is external debt in nature. That is next two very important points. Now come to next one, public account and other liabilities. Now what is this idea of public account? A simple question to all of you. Have you heard of various let's say schemes which are launched by the government of India, but these are available in the banks? Right? For example, PPF. Very straightforward. Best example for this. PPF, Public Provident Fund. Now, point number one. How many of you are under the impression that government of India directly will collect money from you under PPF? Let me see. Right? How many of you are under the impression that government of India is directly collecting money from you under PPF? No, government of India is not collecting. There is an authority in the name of government of India, they will collect the money from you. Is it okay? There is an authority in the name. In the name means government is saying, please invest. In the name of government of India, they will collect the funds from you. So government doesn't directly collect it. But tell me, if your investment in the PPF are not returned, who will you hold accountable? Let me know. You have kept a PPF, right? The PPF amount is not coming to you back. Whom will you hold it accountable for? You will have to hold the government accountable. Any difficulty in understanding this? Any difficulty, please do let me know. So understand the difference between public debt and public account liabilities. In case of public debt, government is borrowing, government is accountable, government has to repay it. But in the second case, the government is not borrowing it directly. Somebody else in the name of the government is collecting the money. They are collecting the money and government is held accountable for this. Government is liable for this. And that is the reason public account liabilities are also part of the liabilities of the government of India. And the third one is very special, idea of an extra budgetary resource. Extra budgetary resource. Now, what is this concept of extra budgetary resources here? Let me give a very simple example. Imagine, right? Imagine here is the government and there is one authority. Any example you can take. There is one authority. The government of India will allocate, I'll take a simple number, in the budget, let's say 1000 crore rupees for implementation of a project. Any authority you take it, don't worry. Food Corporation of India, National Highways Authority of India, there are many authorities. So government of India has allocated 1000 crore rupees for developing a particular project. Now the authority has to use this 1000 crore rupees, develop the project, but there is one problem. What is the problem? The actual money that is required for development of the project is 1800 crore rupees. How much money is actually required for development of this project? 1800, right, crore rupees. Now again, same question. Can you use 1000 crore rupees and develop a project where 1800 crore rupees required? Of course, no, you cannot do that. Now, what you will do is follow this carefully. You will borrow from the market 800 crore rupees and invest in the project. You will borrow 800 crore rupees and spend that money 1000 plus 800, 1800. Now, question number one to all of you. Please look at the picture and tell me. This 800 crore rupees which the authority has borrowed, can we take it as a government borrowing? Please look at the picture and tell me. Can we take it as a government borrowing? No, my dear. Arey Baba. Many of you are saying yes. Then what is the use of writing all of this? What is the use of writing all of this? Is Government of India borrowing here? Is it the Government of India or the authority which is borrowing here? It is the authority which is borrowing 800 crore, not Government of India. Any difficulty in understanding this? Any difficulty in understanding this? This 800 crore, let's say National Highways Authority of India, NHAI, will issue, let's say, bonds in the market, borrow 800 crore rupees from the market. Will you count it as Government of India's borrowing? Think of it. No, you cannot count it as a part of India's borrowing. Point number two. Can I count 800 crore rupees as a part of fiscal deficit? Let me know. Can I count this 800 crore rupees as a part of fiscal deficit? No. Again, some of you are saying yes. No idea. When you say, again, I don't understand. Is Government of India borrowing it? Is Government of India borrowing it? No, Government of India is not borrowing it. So when Government of India is not borrowing it, how can you count it as a part of fiscal deficit of government? I hope you understand this. Right? Imagine there is an authority, Food Corporation of India. Food Corporation of India will take a loan from the market. It is Food Corporation of India which has taken the loan. It is the National Highways Authority of India which has taken the loan, not Government of India. You cannot go to the Government of India, ask for money. Government of India says, who has taken the loan? Go to them and ask. I hope you understand. Right? So understand the logic here. It is not a direct borrowing from the government. Government of India has not borrowed the money. It will not be counted as a part of fiscal deficit of the government. But next point is important. Because this authority is owned by the Government of India, and Government of India's projects for implementing Government of India's policy itself, this authority has taken the loan. This 800 crore rupee will be repaid by the government. This 800 crore rupee will be repaid by the government. Now understand the beauty of this. Understand. Some of you will say, no sir, this is very complicated, etc. If you are the Prime Minister, rather than spending 1800 crore rupees on a project, you will spend only 1000 crore rupees this year. You will ask National Highways Authority of India to borrow from the market. You will repay the 800 crore rupees after 5 years. Have you been able to postpone the expenditure or not? Let me know. Right? Have you been able to postpone the expenditure or not? Right? Is it not helpful tool for the government to control expenditures this year and ensure there is limited amount of expenditure? That is the reason why governments generally opt for extra budgetary resources. But there is a flip side to this. There is a concern related to this. What is the concern? Do you think the fiscal deficit of Government of India gives you a true picture of what is the total liability of Government of India? Let me know now. Do you think the fiscal deficit of Government of India or even the public debt of Government of India, do you think that will give a true picture of total liabilities of the Government of India? No. Then don't you think you are masking, you are hiding what is your actual liability? Is the argument okay with all of you? Right? Are you not masking? That is, are you not hiding what is your total liability by using a tool called as extra budgetary resources. And that is the reason the Finance Commission says we will have to discontinue this. We'll simply have to discontinue. We cannot continue to use all of this. And it also says, right, at least now, right, you have to discontinue, but until then, please disclose, please make it public how much is your extra budgetary borrowings. And please understand, best example of extra budgetary resource, right, another name for this is off budget borrowing. Off budget borrowing. What do you mean by off budget borrowing? Please understand, if Government of India wants to borrow 100 rupees by issuing G security, please tell me, do they need the approval of the parliament or not? Do they take permission from the parliament or not? Arey my dear, budget. I'm talking about the budget. When Government of India wants to issue a bond, that is borrow, will they not include that component of borrowing in the budget document? Will they not introduce the budget document in the parliament, get it approved through the parliament, then borrow from the market? Yes. But in this example that I've told you, is Government of India, point number one, borrowing directly? Is Government of India borrowing directly? No. Point number two, do you think Government of India will take the approval of the parliament to borrow like this from the market? Again, the answer is no. Because government simply in the budget says, I will allocate 1,000 crore. In the budget, government says, I will allocate 1,000 crore rupees. Right? So that permission they have taken, but remaining 800 crore, authority will borrow, spend it. Later, Government of India in the, let's say after 5 years budget, Government of India will introduce one component and say, 800 crore rupees, I am using this. I'm withdrawing 800 crore to repay the loan that, right, earlier they have taken. That is how extra budgetary resources are used. Done? So can I now say that ultimately, even the extra budgetary resources is a liability of Government of India? Done? Can I say that ultimately, because in the future you will not give 800 crores today, but basically after 10 years or after 5 years you will only have to give it. That's the Government of India has to give it. So even the extra budgetary resources will be counted as the total liability of Government of India. So have a look at the total liability now. Public debt plus, right, the extra budgetary resources plus the public account liabilities. Done. So this is basically the concept of the debt profile, the total debt that is faced by the Government of India. Okay. Why did we start? My dear, didn't I tell you about this? Why did they start? This year, imagine Government of India's finances are very weak. They do not want to borrow more, thereby increasing the fiscal deficit. So they will simply postpone the expenditure like this. Okay. So next is FRBM, Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management. Fiscal Responsibility, Budget Management. Now, what is this idea for FRBM? The concept of FRBM was introduced by the government. Right? Concept of FRBM was introduced by the government in order to put a control on how much government is borrowing, for what purposes the government is borrowing, for what purposes the government is actually using it. For example, you please tell me, if there is a revenue deficit, please think of it and tell me, having a revenue deficit, is it good? Let me know. I'm asking a very simple question. Having a revenue deficit, is it good? No. Having revenue deficit is not good. And some of you are saying yes. My dear, under revenue deficit, what does it mean? Your revenue expenditure is greater than revenue receipts. But more importantly, the revenue, right? Any part of the revenue, are you going to create assets? Let me know. Are you going to create assets? But please understand the next point here. If you have a revenue deficit, it simply means you'll be forced to borrow. Done? Right? Because understand this. Some of you might simply say, sir, we can have a surplus on the capital side. capital side, generally we will have a deficit only. Why? Spending is very high. So if you have a revenue deficit, it automatically implies that you will have to borrow from the market. Now the rule is very simple. Whenever you borrow from the market, do not use it for consumption purposes. Use it for creation of asset. Is the logic okay? Whenever you borrow from the market, use this money that you have borrowed to create assets. Do not use it for consumption. Consumption means day-to-day expenditure. So when you have a revenue deficit, you borrow from the market, right? Don't you think this borrowing, which is used for the revenue deficit, it is for consumption, not creation of asset. That is the reason under FRBM, please look at the first point. Please have a look at the first point. RD should be 0%. Can you understand why RD should be 0%? Can I go to the next one? Let me know. Any problem why RD should be 0%? Second, borrow in the market. Borrow in the market 3%. FD should be 3%. Whatever is your FD, reduce it, right? It should be 3%. Now, please tell me, if your FD is 3% and RD is 0%, does it not mean that whatever you are borrowing, it is for asset purposes? Let me know, right? Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. If your FD is right 3% and RD is 0%, does it not simply mean that whatever you are borrowing, it is for infrastructure creation, asset creation? That's the reason the target under FRBM is reduce FD to 3%, but reduce RD to 0%. So that whatever money you are borrowing, it is not for consumption purposes, it is for asset creation purposes. Right? And some of you are asking, sir, what is RD and FD? Fiscal deficit, revenue deficit. Now, reduce FD as well as RD by 0.3% annually and by 0.5% annually. That is in simple terms. Simple terms. Imagine your FD is 5%. And from 1 year to next year, you will have to reduce it by 0.3%. So next year, your target should be 4.7%. Any problem in this? Next year, your target should be 4.4%. So from 1 year to next year, reduce it by 0.3% like this. And RD should be reduced by 0.5% from 1 year to next year. The deficits are allowed to exceed targets only under certain circumstances. Right? This is important. The deficits are allowed to be exceeding the targets only under circumstances. Let me give a very basic idea. Imagine you are the finance minister. 8:20, right? Last 10 minutes are there. 8:20, you are the finance minister. This year, you wanted to borrow 100 crore rupees. 100 crore rupees. And let's say there is one more wave of the pandemic. There is one more wave of the pandemic. Now, please tell me, will there be a higher requirement of borrowings or not? Is it okay? Again, pandemic is one example. What if there is a, right, let's say what if there is a war? What if there is a drought? Right? What if there's a floods? What if there is a recession? There's so many reasons. Is it okay if I say, in case of these kind of situations, you cannot simply stick to what is your target? Certain relaxation has to be provided to you. I hope you understand the meaning now. Certain relaxation has to be provided to you. You cannot simply say, in the budget I said 100 crore rupees, I'll stick to 100 crore. That will not work out. In that case, pandemic will basically ravage the whole economy. You will be stuck to 100 crore rupee borrowing, who will promote recovery in the economy. That is the reason the deficit targets, whatever have been given in the budget, flexibility must be provided. And under certain circumstances, not always. For example, GDP, there is a recession, right? There is a famine, there is a war, there is a list given. Only in such situations, you are allowed to, right, give an exemption like this. And finally, last point for the day, Reserve Bank of India must not subscribe to primary issuance of G securities. That is, RBI should not purchase the G securities directly from Government of India. Right? That is the last point regarding FRBM. Right? Any difficulty? Can we stop the discussion here today? Any difficulty? Please do let me know. Okay, now let's solve the questions. Yesterday's 3 questions are left out. Let's solve, and then right we will I'll address your questions, then we'll finish the discussion. Let's solve the questions now. Last point, my dear, this at least 10 times we have repeated now. RBI should not be purchasing G securities directly from the government. We have discussed all of it. Okay, let's start. Okay, 61% have answered correctly. What is or are the facility or facilities the beneficiaries can get from services of business correspondent or bank sathi in a branchless area? It enables the beneficiaries to draw their subsidies and social security benefits in their villages. Yes or no? Imagine you have received a pension. Government of India, right, has transferred pension amount into your bank account. You are sitting in a village. Can you go to a bank sathi, withdraw the pension? Answer is yes, by the way. Yesterday I've given you examples. Withdrawals, deposits, bank account opening, right, or loan applications, etc., etc. It is allowed. First statement is correct. It will allow the beneficiaries in the rural areas to make deposits as well as withdrawals. Second statement is also correct. So 1 and 2 are correct. Right option is option C, both 1 and 2. Okay. Okay, let's start. 62% have answered correctly. It should have been higher. Which of the following steps are used for contractionary monetary policy? Please tell me, do you remember the term contractionary? Let me know. Do you remember the term contractionary and expansionary or not? Right, I'll tell you the context also where we have discussed. When we have discussed the concept of virtuous and vicious cycle, right? The idea of a counter-cyclical policy, right? Pro-cyclical policy. Contractionary means reduced money supply. Reduced money supply. Increase CRR, money supply will go down or not? Yes. Increase repo rate, will the money supply go down? Yes. Decrease SLR, right? It will basically increase money supply. So 1 and 2 are correct. Right option will be option B, 1 and 2. In which lecture number? I believe it was there in lecture number 4. That will be the National Income Aggregates chapter, right? NIA chapter. Last question. If the RBI decides to adopt an expansionist monetary policy, opposite to contractionary, okay, which of the following RBI will not do? I'll solve it. Please look at the question very carefully. If RBI decides to adopt an expansionary monetary policy, which of the following RBI will not do? Cut and optimize a statutory liquidity ratio. Simple question to all of you. If RBI wants to increase money supply, will RBI use the first one or not? Will RBI use the first one? Yes. But you will have to find which of the following RBI will not use. Increase the marginal standing facility rate, MSF. increase marginal standing facility rate. MSF is a rate of interest that RBI will charge on a short-term loan that they will give to bank overnight basis. If MSF rate is increased, don't you think the borrowing of the banks from RBI will automatically go down? Right? So second one, it will not increase, rather money supply will decrease. Cut the bank rate and repo rate. If the bank rate and repo rate are cut, money supply will increase. So in order to increase money supply, 1 can be used, 3 can be used. Can you use 2? No, you cannot use. So right option for the question will be option B, 2 only. Done? So let's stop the discussion today here. These 3 questions were left out from banking chapter. We have solved them. Let's continue the discussion tomorrow. Okay, regarding the NK Singh review committee, etc., etc. We'll continue the discussion tomorrow. But before that, any other questions that you people have? How to frame a statement to explain extra budgetary borrowing. These are the different sources that the government uses apart from the budgetary route to borrow from the market. In fact, there is a document which is given to you, additional reading material. All these definitions are given there. Please use it. Non-marketable securities. I'll give a very simple example. Imagine there is a bond which is issued by the government to a bank. In fact, there is a bond. There is a type of bond which are called as zero coupon bonds. I'll tell you about that later. Have patience. The basic feature of a zero coupon bond that government issues to the bank is that they are not allowed to sell them. The banks are not allowed to sell them. Can I call this as non-marketable bonds, non-marketable securities? What happens when there will be a recession, when government has to repay? Of course, government will repay. Even if there is a recession, government will repay the loan. Sir, you said more wider is the difference between PD and FD good for the government. I said, if FD is, let's say, 100 crore rupees, which represents borrowings, and your PD is 0 rupees. If your PD is 0 rupees, what is the meaning of it? It means 100 crore rupees that you have borrowed, it is only to pay interest. And what is the other implication of this? It also means for the current year, for this current financial year, whatever expenditure you want to incur, you have sufficient amount of revenue. That's the reason I said higher the gap, it represents a better financial position, financial revenue capacity for the government. Difference between income and capital receipt, right? In what context are you asking? Capital receipts we have discussed, right? Income is basically the revenue. Okay. We have an article on IBBI and debt resolution professional. In the article, we have insolvency professionals are hired by the lenders, but in class, we discussed that they are appointed by the authority. I'll tell you the process. Again, this is very technical concept. The insolvency professionals are recommended by the companies, that is the creditors. But even before that, there is a temporary insolvency professional, right? That is insolvency IP is appointed. But even if the committee of creditors will come out, right, will basically bring the recommendation or will give the recommendation, the appointment for this process, appointment means who will give the approval of this IP, it is done by the NCLT itself. Okay, any other questions? In both public account, other liabilities and extra budget resources, an external authority borrows on behalf of the government. Please understand this again. In public account, Government of India borrows, Government of India repays. In public debt, in public account, on behalf, in the name, rather than saying on behalf, in the names in the market, or there are many avenues in the market where people will deposit money. But the ultimate liability, ultimate duty of making a repayment will be on the shoulders of the government. Right? And in case of extra budgetary resources, an authority will borrow for development of infrastructure. Repayment is done by the government. That's the reason all the 3 will be taken to represent a total liability of the government. Okay. recovery of loans is already the government money, then how can it again be added in a capital receipt? My dear, today I will give you 100 rupee loan back. Today I will give you 100 rupee loan back. This 100 rupee loan I had taken in 2019. Now please tell me, when I give you a loan of 100 rupee, when I repay a loan of 100 rupee, will you count that 100 rupee in this year finances or not? That is exactly the recovery of loans. Okay. Anything else? Anything else? Government also uses provident fund for expenditure. Yes, government also uses. That is, again, government will borrow. Government will not simply take it like this. Government will take and again repay. That's the whole idea. Okay. Sir, except public debt, other debt not required for parliamentary approval? No. Right? The whole features, in fact, that's a reason when you read about these types of accounts, I'll repeat it again. There are three types of accounts in case of government. One is the public account, second one is a contingency, third one is a consolidated. In case of consolidated, Government of India requires approval. In case of public account, Government of India doesn't require any approval of the parliament. Okay. Is not RBI collecting money on behalf of Government of India for bonds issued? Is that also under public account and liabilities? My dear, if Government of India will sell a government bond, take a money, transfer it to Government of India, how does it become a liability? Tell me. Okay, done. Sir, any mains question? I've told this at least 4 times in case of banking discussion. Listen to my lectures. That's the reason. Please listen. There are no questions in the last 5 years from the chapter banking. I've told you this yesterday also. Right? But again, I don't know what you listen to. Where are you looking at? I absolutely have no idea. Right? But there have been no questions from the banking chapter for the last 5 years, right, in the mains exam. Done. So let me stop the discussion here today. Right? Tomorrow we'll continue with NK Singh Review Committee. Right? NK Singh Review Committee. So take care. See you tomorrow. Revise well. Right? Please revise. It's basically, I'm getting a feeling that many of you do not want to revise. You want to get everything directly fetched into your chip, right? Maybe a memory chip. That will never happen. Trust me, that will never happen. Right? So I can understand when I say, right, let's say a term called as GDP. Some of you ask, what is GDP? This is a 12th class. Some of you ask, what is GDP? When I say virtuous cycle, you ask me, what is virtuous cycle? My dear, you're supposed to revise all of it. Okay, done. Take care. So see you tomorrow. Right. Good night. Take care.